Good evening. How's it going, everybody? Well, this might be the most interesting thing that I have seen today. I watched beginning to saw that the Murdaugh trial was the beginning of the Murdaugh trial was happening. It looked like they were creating some motions, but before it got into it, I paused it, saved it, and was like, I want to stream about this tonight because I think it'd be pretty interesting. If you don't know too much about Murdaugh, just follow one of my earlier streams. I sort of break it down as far as the timeline goes. But tonight they dropped some more of the Twitter files, and I guess this is Twitter files 3.0. I guess Barry Weiss dropped some the other night. I read some of that off, and it was interesting, but not telling you much more than we already know. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this one up for, what is today? The 9th of December. I'm assuming this is almost like the 12 days of Christmas. They'll just keep dropping off more information that we already know. I haven't read through this, so I don't know what it's going to show. Might be just a big nothing burger. Might be something really good. We won't know until we see. So why don't we bring that up? We'll take a look and see what they have to say. You get to read this along with me. So unless you've already read it, which I'm sure if you're on Twitter, you've probably already seen this information and already know all about it. But this is new to me. So kick back, enjoy. I'll read this off as I go. Pull up one more thing here. There we go. All right. So what we've got, Matt Taibbi, and it looks like he released this at 6:04. Lucky for me, I was actually having a wonderful dinner with my wonderful wife at 6 o'clock in the evening, kicking back and then just enjoying a little bit of tacos. So I broke myself out a little Negro Modelo, enjoyed that with my dinner. And after dinner, of course, doing a little bit of what do we got tonight? Got a little bit of Michner's. Just there looks like a small batch. So we'll give this a try. Hopefully it tastes wonderful because I'm sure I'm going to need it by the end of the night because I'm not going to stop my broadcast tonight until I have actually finished reading through this and watching that part of the Murdaugh trial. So, if you're here, well, let me pull that up. All you got to do is hit the like and subscribe. There you go. Right down below. There's also a little spot over there in the corner that all you got to do is hit. That takes you, I believe, to my Twitter, or it might subscribe you. Subscribe if you like it. Hit like if you don't like it. Cheers. Let's get on with this shit show of Twitter. Twitter Files 3.0. Let's see what they have to say. Enjoy. So, thread. The Twitter Files, the removal of Donald Trump, Part 1, October 20th, January 6th. The world knows much of the story of what happened between riots and the Capitol on January 6th and the removal of President Donald Trump from Twitter on January 8th. Yes, everybody already knows that. Don't need to tell us more. We'll show you what hasn't been revealed, the erosion of standards within the company in months before January 6th, decisions by high-ranking executives to violate their own policies, and more against the backdrop of ongoing documented interaction with federal agencies. This first installment covers the period before the election through January 6th. Tomorrow, we've got someone new here. And we'll just give a little follow there because they're going to give a little bit more information. Schellenberg, MD, will detail the chaos inside Twitter on January 7th on Sunday, Barry Weiss will reveal the secret internal communications from the key date of January 6th. So this should be a pretty interesting week. It looks like they found that doing just this small trickle of information isn't going to quite work out. So what they've done is they've thrown in just a little bit of extra information in there of some other people that are going to be covering this stuff, and they're going to be telling us more information. Should be pretty interesting. Number 5. Whatever your opinion on the decision to remove Trump that day, the internal communications at Twitter between January 6th and January 8th have clear historical import. Even Twitter's employees understood the moment. It was a landmark moment in the annals of speech. Is this the first sitting head of state to ever be suspended? Okay, that's a nice teaser. I like that. Number 6. As soon as they finished banning Trump, Twitter execs started processing new power. They prepared to ban future presidents and White Houses, perhaps even Joe Biden. The new administration says one exec will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary. And here's what he states right here. If it is clear that another account is being used for the purpose of evading a ban, it is also subject to suspension. For government accounts, such as President of the United States and at White House, we will not suspend those accounts, but will take action to limit their use. However, these accounts will be transitioned over to the new administration in due course and will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary to alleviate real-world harm. I love how they're the arbiters of what they consider real world harm. That's another story. Number 7. Twitter executives removed Trump in part over what one executive called the context surrounding actions by Trump and supporters over the course of the election and frankly last 4+ years. In the end, they looked at the broad picture, but that approach can cut both ways, as you can see. Hi, JJ. I'm working with so-and-so on my team to put together a doc to share with you with a point of view from research, ours, academics with whom we have been working, etc., on Donald J. Trump's language as coded incitement to further violence. In the meantime, here's our quick take. The decision on whether to pull that particular tweet or use that as a last straw for Trump depends on many factors, including 1, the overall context and narrative in which that tweet lives. We currently analyze tweets and consider them at tweet-by-tweet basis, which does not appropriately take into account the context surrounding. You can use the yelling fire into a crowded theater example, which, if anybody knows, yelling fire in a crowded theater is a really poor example, because if you yell fire into a crowded theater and there's clearly a fire, you want people to pay attention, and you should not get beat down because you yelled fire in a crowded theater. It's hyperbole. Anyhow, context matters, and the narrative that Trump and his friends, have pursued over the course of this election, and frankly, the last 4+ years must be taken into account when interpreting and analyzing that tweet. The larger question is around our moral imperative and decision as a company, which user sentiment should not drive based on, number 1, blah. And I believe that this tweet and his tweet does violate our rules when taking that historical context and current climate into account. Number 8, the bulk of internal debate leading to Trump's ban took place in those 3 January days. However, the intellectual framework was laid in the months preceding the Capitol riots. This is before January 6th. Months preceding it. I would assume the months preceding it would have been after the votes were tallied, everybody cast their vote, and it was still being counted. It was still being determined. If Trump was president, everybody was calling it that Biden was president. So they're talking about the months from prior. If you remember, there wasn't too many months prior to that. Number 9. Before January 6th, Twitter was a unique mix of automated rules-based enforcement and more subjective moderation by senior executives. As Barry White reported, the firm had a vast array of tools for manipulating visibility, most all of which were thrown at Trump and others pre January 6th. Now we move on to number 10. As this wonderful election approached, senior executives, perhaps under pressure from federal agencies with whom they met more as time progressed, increasingly struggling with rules and began to speak of VIOS as pretext to do what they likely have done anyway. Number 11. After January 6, internal Slack show Twitter executives getting a kick out of intensifying relationships with federal agencies. Here's Trust and Safety's head, Yoel Roth, lamenting on the lack of generic enough calendar descriptions to concealing his very interesting meeting partners. As he says, it happens, I'm a big believer in calendar transparency, but I reached a certain point where my meetings became very interesting to people and there weren't meeting names generic enough to cover. Anyway, let me know. Very boring business meeting that is definitely not about Trump. Yoel Roth, pretty much. Yoel Roth, definitely not meeting with the FBI, I swear. I'll have a mask off. So, apparently, meeting with the FBI is part of Yoel Roth. So, well, I'm definitely not meeting with these people. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I didn't do anything. Nah, nothing's going on here. Nothing to see. Nothing to see. Number 12. These initial reports are based on searches for docs linked to prominent executives whose names are already public. They include Roth, former Trust and Policy Chief Vijay Gadde, and recently Plank Walk Deputy General Counsel and former FBI lawyer, none other than Jim Baker. Yes, Jim Baker is general counsel for Twitter at this point, which he did not like Trump. I'm sure Trump didn't really give two shits about him. But alas. Number 13, one particular Slack channel offers a unique window into the evolving thinking of top officials in late 2020 and early 2021. Number 14, on October 8th, 2020, executives opened a channel called US 2020 _ XFN _ enforcement. Through January 6th, this would be home for discussions about election-related removals, especially ones that involved high-profile accounts, often called VITs or very important tweeters. And luckily, I'm not very important, and I only tweet a bunch of bullshit. But here's what they say. Hey, everyone. Here, starting tomorrow, October 9th, until October 15th, this channel will be used for the following reasons related to the US 2020 elections. Trends identified that require scaled investigations, high-profile account escalations that potentially require soft interventions, scalable solutions required, edge cases for XFN consultation, highlight text issues, bug tools, outrage. Okay. Gyra tickets. This is an enforcement channel between T and AMP-S and TWS to help speed up our response related to election issues over the coming few weeks. Get will start providing a handover starting a PAC shift tomorrow, October the 9th, using the following template: handover next shift, Thursday, October 8th. Open escalations, none notes from shift, Can you please make sure everyone on your team is within the channel? The teams that we include are follow: site integrity, safety policy, product trust, safety operations, media ops, global escalation team. And if you have any questions or concerns, let me know. Number 15. There was at least some tension between safety operations, a larger department whose staffers used a more rule-based process for addressing issues like porn, scam, and threats, and a smaller, more powerful cadre of senior policy execs like Roth and Gad. Yeah, I'm going to start calling her Gad. Number 16. The latter group were a high-speed Supreme Court of moderation, issuing rules, content rulings on the fly, often in minutes and based on guesses, gut calls, even Google searches, even in cases involving the president. One of my wife's favorite sayings is, what keeps her in business are the Google lawyers, because they Google the dumbest shit and they say the dumbest shit whenever they call her up and want to file something that is not applicable in the state of Georgia, because that is not part of Georgia state code. So she loves to call them Google warriors, because they went to no law school. They didn't study any sort of law. They don't know the first thing about what Georgia law is specifically. And they also don't know what her specific area of law that is being practiced have certain requirements and certain codes. So she calls them Google lawyers. So Google searches, they are learning their information from Google searches. Cheers, you Google lawyers. You can go fuck yourself, and thank you very much for your bucks, because you keep me employed. I appreciate it. Everyone received this escalation just now. Breaking news: 50,000 Ohio voters getting wrong absentee ballots, out of control, a rigged election. A rigged election would be enough to be in violation, right? If the claim of fact were inaccurate, yes, but it looks like that's true. And of course, he shows it. So he didn't lie, he didn't bullshit. 50,000 absentee votes were missing in Ohio. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure they'll straighten it out eventually. Number 17. During this time, executives were also clearly liaising with federal enforcement and intelligence agencies about moderation of election-related content. While we're still at the start of reviewing the Twitter files, we're finding out more about these interactions every day. Policy Director Nick Pickles. I'm sorry, if you've got a name like Nick Pickles, you might want to change it. Actually, Nick Pickles would be a pretty cool name to have, just to fuck with people. What's your name? Nick. Nick what? Nick Pickles. Is asked if they should say Twitter detects misinfo through ML, human review, and partnerships with outside experts. The employee asks, I know that it's been a slippery process, but not sure if you want our public explanation to hang on that. Here's what it says. And Pickles, are you comfortable with marketing talking about misinfo, saying that we detect it through ML, human review, and partnerships with outside experts? I know it's been a slippery process. Not sure if you want our public explanation to hang our hat on that. Same thing I just read. So we go to 19. Pickles quickly asks if they could just say partnerships. After a pause, he says, not sure we describe the FBI, DHS as experts. Or some NGOs that are academic. 20. This post about the Hunter Biden laptop situation shows that Roth not only met weekly with FBI and DHS, but with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Yoel Roth has checked in, but here's what they say. What's new for you since our last check-in? Hacked materials exploded. We blocked the New York Post story, then we unblocked it, but said the opposite when said we unblocked it, and now we're in a messy situation where our policy is in shambles. Comms is angry. Reporters think we're idiots, which they are. And yes, comms should be angry. And yes, your policy is in shambles. And we're refactoring an exceedingly complex policy 18 days out from the election. In short, FML, weekly sync with FBI, DHS, DNI, re-election security. The meeting happened about 15 minutes after the aforementioned hacked materials implosion. The government declined to share anything useful when asked. Monthly meeting with FBI, FITF, briefed on several ongoing investigations. Roth's report to FBI, DHS, DNI is almost a farce. It's not true. In its self-flagellating tone. Just stop using 25-cent words when you could use a nickel word. Basically, it's almost a joke in their bullshit tone. We blocked the NYPD story, then unblocked it, but said the opposite. Comms is angry's reporter think we're idiots. In short, FML, fuck my life. Yeah. Number 23. We got a ways to go. So if you're here and you're reading and you're watching this, grab yourself a nice little drink, raise yourself a toast, and say, thank you, Twitter. I hope you release more bullshit that we already pretty much knew. This just goes into a little bit more depth. But cheers anyway, motherfucker. Some of Roth's later slacks indicate his weekly confabs with federal law enforcement involved separate meetings here. He ghosts the FBI and DHS respectively to go first in an Aspen Institute thing, then take a call with Apple. Oh, Roth, hey there. I have to miss the FBI and DHS meetings today. Unfortunately, I saw you're on the invites for both as our site policy. Can you give me a quick readout if there's anything interesting that comes up? Sure thing. I hope that everything's okay. Yeah, I just have conflicts at both times. An Aspen Institute thing this morning on vaccines that I have to present at, and then a call with Apple to avoid us getting kicked out of the App Store during the DHS one. Both those seem very important. And, oh, indeed. Sure. So, y'all, you went and talked with Apple so you wouldn't get kicked out of the App Store for being total douche nozzles. And then, of course, you looks like, you had to deal with some COVID-related misinformation because, it's always out there. You got to watch out for the beer bug because, that misinformation just fuck you off. Anyhow, here we are at number 24. Here, the FBI sends reports about a pair of tweets, the second of which involves a former Tippecanoe County, Indiana councilor and a Republican named John Basham claiming between 2% and 25% ballots by mail are being rejected for errors. That's not bad. It's not uncommon, but they're mail-in ballots and you're going to have errors. You're going to have errors with regular ballots. The only problem is, you want to have a nice, fair, even election, and whenever you've got millions of votes that need to be counted, computer can make it a little bit faster, but they only can read the information that you put in there. So, Let's continue on. Here, the FBI sends reports about a pair of tweets, the second of which involves a former Tippecanoe, and we go into that, blah, blah, blah. So we just got this report, FBI considering two tweets related to the shredding of mail-in ballots. This is proven to be false via this. And do we have a moment ready for this one? I believed it was deemed no vio on numerous occasions. Matt Taibbi says the FBI's second report concerned this tweet by John Basham. Okay. So, Democrats are in complete panic as their massive push by vote by mail is backfiring on them. Two things are unfolding. An unexpected number of registered Republicans are returning ballots. Between 2% and 25% of ballots by mail are being rejected for errors. And as you can see, they've got these pictures. This was the tweet that was removed by John Basham. Number 25, the FBI flagged the tweet, then got circulated in the enforcement Slack. Twitter cited PolitiFact to say that the first story was proven to be false, then noted the second was already deemed no vio on numerous occasions. And of course, that was that right there. The group then decides to apply Learn How Voting is Safe and Secure label because one commenter says it's totally normal to have a 2% error rate. Both then gives the final go-ahead to the process initiated by the FBI. I think we can use the mail-in voting label for this one as is. Number 27. We're just moving right along. Examining the entire election enforcement Slack, we did not see one reference to moderation requests from the Trump campaign, the Trump White House, or Republicans generally. We looked, they may exist. We were told they do. However, they were absent here. So what they're saying is they examined all of the election enforcement through what was being told through Slack, and they didn't see any reference to those requests from the Trump campaign, although Twitter says that those were actually in there. They just haven't been able to find them. Number 31. In one case, former Arizona Governor Mike Huckabee joke tweets about mailing in ballots for his deceased parents and grandparents. This inspires a long Slack that reads, Tatiana McGrath, parody, I agree it's a joke, concedes a Twitter employee, but there's also literally admitting in a tweet a crime. Tatiana McGrath is a comedian. If you don't know this by now, I don't remember the name of the comedian off the top of my head, but it is a parody account, and it's been a parody account, and the comedian, the name just is like on the tip of my brain. Getting old does that to you. This comedian has basically written and created this non-character that is the SJW of SJW Karens that you could ever possibly imagine. They are all about that shit. And it basically, if you ever get a chance, you need to read some Tatiana McGrath because it is absolutely hilarious if you know it's a parody. If not, it's frighteningly similar to the same kind of idiots that are constantly posting on Twitter that you have to go, no, you're an effing idiot, piss off, leave me alone. Which most of the time I don't. I just like to send like ugly memes to them, like really fat women doing really disgusting, vile things. Carrying on. The group declares Huck's foreign Huck's an edge case, and though one notes we don't make exceptions for jokes or satire, they ultimately decide to leave him because we've poked enough bears. I wonder what bears it would be that they were poking, because you don't want to be poking bears. It's a bad idea. They ultimately decided to leave him because, anyhow, could still mislead people. The humor adverse group declares before moving on from Huckabee. As you can see, they go through this, basically saying what they said. Yeah, I could see us taking action under misleading claims that cause confusion about established laws, regulations, procedures. Basically, don't fuck with the old man is what they're saying. Don't fuck with the old man, because there's no point in if we pursue this, it's just gonna rile everybody up. So it stops at 33, but I could have sworn that I saw that there were even more. Let's go and see what we've got. Oh yeah, it goes much deeper. So, where did I leave off at? Left off at 33. Okay, so we're at 33. Let's see if it shows anything more. Okay, we will continue on here because it looks like there's a little bit more. 33. Roth suggests moderation, even in this absurd case, could depend on whether or not the joke results in confusion. This seemingly silly case actually foreshadows serious later issues. So yeah, I could see us taking action under the misleading claims that cause confusion about established laws, regulation, procedures, and methods of a civic process, but it's not one that we could really label in a useful way, so it's removal of a stupid and ill-advised joke or nothing. I may be inclined not to remove without report from voting authorities, given it's been a while since he tweeted it, and virtually all of the replies I'm seeing are critical, counter speech, and ironics, Ross, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. So that's where we're at with that. Number 34 from Mr. Matt Taibbi. In the docs, execs often expand criteria to subjective issues like intent. Yes, a video is authentic, but why was it shown? Orientation was a banned tweet shown to condemn or support or reception. Did a joke cause confusion? This reflex will become key in January 6th. Another example, Twitter employees prepare to slap a mail-in voting is safe warning label on a Trump tweet about a postal screw-up in Ohio before realizing that the events took place, which meant the tweet was factually accurate. Nearly 50,000 voters received wrong ballots in Ohio. Does you feel safe mailing in your ballots? Here's the tweet. Here's what they put. Learn how voting by mail is safe and secure. Not sure what the process is. Forget. But we are expected to do policy comms right up for this. Donald Trump just posted these two tweets. Not sure what that process is. Forget. Are we expecting to do the policy comms right up for this? It's been on PTO, so not 100% up to speed. My understanding in both cases is that the events took place and that the commentary by the President of the United States, in his opinion, related to these real events so that there wouldn't be any labeling action violation on our side. Yeah, those are factually accurate. Thanks for clarifying. Yes, thank you for clarifying. They come back. Very well on speed, Trump was being visibly filtered as late as a week before the election. Here, senior execs didn't appear to have a particular violation, but still worked fast to make sure that a fairly anodyne Trump tweet couldn't be replied to, shared, or liked. And it would be, what's the team's recommendation? Thank you. Agree with the recommendation. Flagging right now with leadership, given it's President of the United States. We'll set up a call. Can we use a new doc per pie review? Okay. Also include that in our playbook after. EDI approved. It looks like it might be FBI approved, but it looks like EDI approved. Don't know what that means. 37. A seemingly innocuous follow-up involved a tweet from actor at the real James Wood, whose ubiquitous presence in argued over Twitter data sets and already Twitter files in joke. Twitter is suppressing this tweet by the president. Here's the screen grab. And of course, Mr. James Woods sent that out. Cheers to you, Mr. James Woods. I've enjoyed everything that I've ever seen you in, and hopefully you can keep acting. Hopefully. After Woods angrily quote tweeted about Trump's warning label, Twitter staff, in a preview of what ended up happening after January 6th, despaired for a reason for action, but resolved to hit him hard on future vio. Considering the PV2 bug outs this weekend, James Woods being so over the strike limit that our tools won't work on him, I would suggest we action him for something worth the fiasco rather than this screenshot, since we don't have a firm policy basis for action on his account. Yep, you are fine letting this one lie. Can hit him hard on the future with firmer basis. Here, a label is applied to Georgia Republican Congresswoman Jody Hice for saying no to big tech censorship, and mailed ballots are more prone to fraud than in-person balloting. It's just common sense. That was Representative Jody Hice's take on this. Twitter teams went easy on Hice, only applying soft intervention, with Roth worrying about censorship optics backlash. Basically, your account doesn't mean shit to us, so we are going to just give it a little soft censor because you don't have that many followers. Now, if the president would have tweeted that, we might have had something different to say, but seeing it was just, you're nobody. Devil's advocate. Quoted tweet still shows up with the EDI and actual content. Rep. Hice says is lower level, more fraud with mail-in ballots than in person is much more of a legitimate statement, even if scale is still minuscule. I think I would lean towards just putting an MIB soft intervention on this rather than the full ED. Agree. Yep, I was typing that. Haha. I think going too far down the rabbit hole of labeling critical speech dangerous, it becomes a self-reinforcing censorship cycle. I am currently responding to Judicial Watch's whining to public policy. I regret nothing, but I am happy to iterate what rules they violated. 41. Meanwhile, there are multiple instances of involving pro-Biden tweets warning Trump may try to steal the election that got surfaced, only to be approved by senior executives. This one, they decide, just expresses concern that mailed ballots may not make it on time. This is so disgusting and terrifying. They're going to try to steal the election. You have 1 week. If you haven't voted yet, don't mail, drop it off, or vote early. If you can't vote, make sure your family is, unless they're Trump supporters. Just let them forget. This is an edge case with commentary, encouraging voters not to vote by mail. I believe we should label it. Conlon, I think I'd not bother with labeling this one. It's still encouraging people to vote, but expresses the concern that mailed ballots might not make it in time, which seems fair this close to the election date. Still encouraging people to turn in their ballots in person or to vote in person. Thank you, Patrick. Number 43. In this exchange, again unintentionally humorous, former Attorney General Eric Holder claimed the U.S. Postal Service was deliberately crippled, ostensibly by the Trump administration. He was initially hit with a generic warning label, but it was quickly taken off by Roth. Eric Holder, it's too late to use the mails. Given the Supreme Court rulings, I urge everyone to now vote in person, early vote, or use drop boxes. Protect your health, but don't let the court and the deliberately crippled Postal Service deprive you of your most precious civil right. Plan your vote. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, folks, can we reverse the label on this tweet? So they reversed the label on Eric Holder's tweet that was basically saying the same thing that the tweet prior to it was saying, that they wanted to suppress. Keep in mind, suppression of vote is never a good idea, and I encourage anyone that is going to be voting to vote in person if you possibly can. Do not trust doing a mail-in voting. That's my opinion. Not advice. If you go in person, you can be seen, you can have your vote placed. I understand in certain circumstances you may want to cast your vote early. That's completely fine. But this idea that you're going to get some drastic beer bug, whatever you want to call it, by going and voting in person. I don't know. Here in the state of Georgia, we get these little things. All you have to do is touch it. They've been doing that for quite some time. It's really super easy. It takes me all of walking out my door, walking a block, not even an entire block, showing up my polling place, walk in. There might be 5 people in front of me. They're all casting their votes. I cast mine. We all walk out of the place. I go home. I go about my day. It takes no time at all. I understand that some people might have to go a little bit of a distance to get to the place. I never saw any issues at all for people coming to vote in my neck of the woods. No problems. So you do you. But if you're having to stand in line for a long period of time, stay in the line. Just wait it out. It's not that bad outside. Even if it's raining, you just bundle up for it, package up for it, have your umbrella, and just make a day out of it. Enjoy your time there because you're doing your civic duty by voting. Vote whenever you're supposed to. Understand what you're voting for, I think, is probably one of the most important things. Know the candidate you're voting for and understand what sort of bills are going to be passed, what information is going to be passed. Pay attention to this stuff because it could determine whether they're putting a freeway through your front door and you're going to have to move, or it may depend on, if you're elderly, that they're increasing your bus rates. All that stuff can be factored into your elections. So know a little bit about your elections. It doesn't take much time. You can do a quick search and see what bills are up, what you're going to be voting on, and then you can just do a little bit of research and you can figure that stuff out pretty quick. An informed voter is a good voter. if you're an uninformed voter and you're just going by hyperbole, by what might be shown on YouTube, what might be shown on Twitter, what might be shown in the news, don't pay any attention to that. That's all opinion. Their opinion is about as good as mine is. Go and do the research yourself. Figure it out. If you don't know enough about it, might be a good idea to sit down with somebody that knows a little bit about it and can actually walk you through it. And then use some critical thinking. I would assume if you're voting, you have an IQ that's high enough to actually be a surviving member of society. And I would suggest everybody go and vote whenever it's time. I would love to see those numbers reached, every single man, woman, and whatever you might be. Reach out, vote, do your thing. Anyhow, I think I'm going to get in trouble for that shit. Number 44. Later in November 2020, Roth asked if staff had a debunk moment on the SCYTL Smartmatic vote counting stories, which the DHS contacted him and were a combination of about 47 conspiracy theories. Hi there, me again. Do we have a debunk moment on these voting conspiracies? DHS referred it to us on a call today, sadly not public, as a combination of about 47 different conspiracy theories. So hopefully there's stuff out there. Conspiracy theories. I hadn't heard any conspiracy theories. I heard a bunch of information, but nobody gave me any good idea what that information was. You would hear stuff out there, but until I can confirm information, I tend to avoid bullshit information. It's a good way to live your life. You know, somebody says BS. A bunch of people say BS. And until you see it, it's still going to be BS. No matter how many people say there's a fire out there. If you don't see a fire, you're not even seeing smoke. You have to assume that people are just misinformed or spreading information that's not true. Continuing on, number 45. On December 10th, as Trump was in the middle of firing off 25 tweets saying things like, "A coup is taking place in front of our eyes," Twitter executives announced a new L3 de-amplification tool. This meant a warning label now could also come up with de-amplifications. Hello, everyone. I wanted to give you an update on some of our enforcement options for tweets containing the civic misinformation we've seen. It's been decided that tweets that we've manually reviewed and determined need a label will now be subject to L3 de-amplification. Further restricting the extent to which that tweet can be shared. The current batch of entity IDs will soon be used for automated labeling work, but I've created a new batch of entity IDs for the labels that we've been using the most during the past couple of weeks. Labels that we've only rarely used or that have been depreciated already, haven't gotten an L3 update. If there's a moment when we need the L3 version for one of those labels, please flag it to Matt Graydon or myself. To find the new L3 entity IDs, please look in the L3 US 2020 11 December update tab in the Civic Integrity Entity IDs Strato spreadsheet. So, they created something that could mute that information and suppress information that was coming out. Whether it be true or false doesn't matter. The fact that Twitter was doing this is what becomes disconcerting. Here we are, finally, to number 46. Some executives wanted to use the new de-amplification tool to silently limit Trump's reach more right away, beginning with the following tweet. This claim about election fraud is disputed. Find out more. So this is what they started putting into their tweets. It's no different than what Google or YouTube has on their same thing about stay informed. This claim about election fraud. Damn it. Keep saying frog. Is disputed. Find out more, and then they will send you off to more information. Trump got 11 million more votes than Jim Jordan via American Agenda. However, in the end, the team had to use older, less aggressive labeling tools, at least for that day, until the L3 entries went live the following morning. So here's it is. Thank you. Should enforcement with these new entities start now, or should it wait until the policy officially goes live tomorrow morning? Good point. Let's start enforcement tomorrow morning per PST. That'll save the APAC crew from having to do it, and the Dublin office will only have to change things towards the end of the day. With this generic fraud claim, if okay, can I confirm to use the new identity? Blah, blah, blah. Thank you. And so this is what it looked like. Hi, let's use the old one for generic fraud claims. We won't use the L3 entities until tomorrow morning by San Francisco time. Copy that. Shank ya. The significance is that it shows that Twitter in 2020, at least, was deploying a vast range of visible and invisible tools to rein in Trump's engagement long before January 6th. The ban will come after other avenues are exhausted. Number 49. In Twitter docs, execs frequently refer to bots. Example, let's put a bot on that. A bot is just an automated heuristic moderation tool. It can be anything. Every time a person in Brazil uses green and blob in the same sentence, action might be taken. Bot application right there. In this instance, it appears moderators added a bot for Trump claim made on Breitbart. The bot ends up becoming an automated tool invisibly watching both Trump and apparently Breitbart. Will add media ID to bot. Trump by J6 was quickly covered in bots. As you can see, we'll also add media ID to bot. Hey team, going to add a fraud claim label to this claim of fraud at about 40 seconds of the video. See, if we don't root out alleged voter fraud, then we don't have a country anymore. Source Donald J. Trump on Facebook. There is no way to follow the frenzied exchanges among Twitter personnel from between January 6th and January 8th without knowing the basics of the company's vast lexicon of acronyms and Orwellian unwords. If you don't understand what they mean by Orwellian unwords, then you just need to read Animal Farm or 1984, and you might understand it. Maybe at some point in time, I will read those on here. But that is another day and not tonight, because I do not have a whole lot of time to do that. He continues on, Mr. Taibbi. To bounce an account is to put it in timeout, usually a 12-hour review or cool off. Gave a heads up to folks, give it another few minutes, then proceed with bouncing. Number 53. Interstitial, one of the many nouns used as a verb in Twitter speak. Denialist is another, means placing a physical label atop a tweet so it can't be seen. Pi has multiple meanings, one being public interested interstitial, I don't know, a covering label applied for public interest reasons. The post below also references proactive 5, a proactive visibility filtering. FTR, these were basically flagged by our agents who are prioritizing our proactive cues. So process working well at the moment. Basically, we're making sure shit can't be seen, and it seems to be working well. Number 55. This is all necessary background to January 6th. Before the riots, the company was engaged in an inherently insane, impossible project trying to create an ever-expanding, ostensibly rational set of rules to regulate every conceivable speech situation that might arise between humans. This project was preposterous, yet its leaders were unable to see this, having become infected with groupthink, coming to believe sincerely that it was Twitter's responsibility to control as much as possible what people could talk about, how often, and with whom. The firm's executives on day one of the January 6th crisis at least tried to pay lip service to its dizzying array of rules. By day 2, they began wavering, and by day 3, a million rules were reduced to one. What we say goes. I believe that's all we've got. Looks like it stops at number 55. Not seeing anything more past that, but we'll scroll through it just to see. 40, 48, 53. Oh, there is more. No, that's it. 57 is where it stops. So basically, what Matt Taibbi has shown is that information surrounding January 6th, any sort of thing that was called voter misinformation or not true, it would be flagged, it would be put down, it would be quieted, made sure that information wasn't spread between people. The problem with this kind of hushing speech I want to know who's saying it. I want to know the person that's lying to me. I'm smart enough most of the time. Now, I'm a total retard. Most of the time, I like to see whenever somebody's giving information out. They say X, Y, and Z happened. If I check it out and I see, well, that's not true. I was there. That X, Y, or Z didn't happen. Then I can disregard pretty much anything else that this person has to say. Like, for example, I went to France and toured the countryside with my wife last year. Had a really good time just chilling, checking everything out. And she didn't realize that our last few days were going to end up falling on Bastille Day in France, in Paris. I don't like crowds. She knows this. But she didn't realize that it was going to fall on that day. So we actually were there for Bastille Day and actually went out and, walked around because me being the horrible husband that I am, the god awful, thorn in her side, said, "Sure, I'll go with you, my love. Let's go wander the streets of France, of Paris, and we will go look at fireworks and go mingle with the crowds." And actually, the crowds were very pleasant, very nice. Everybody was pretty chill, pretty cool, no issues going on. And the next morning, we got up, we jumped on a plane and flew home. Well, I get home and I open up Twitter and I see a tweet. I don't remember who it was from, saying violence breaks out at Bastille Day, and see all of this blood and people being beat down and running and chasing. And I was like, when did this happen? It was like, well, it happened during Bastille Day. And I was just like, well, I was there and I didn't see any of that. I mean, I'm not blind, but I was there. And actually, I was about half a block from where this supposed picture was being taken. I was like, no, I was there. I didn't see anything. I call bullshit. And they pretty much blocked me after that. I was like, okay, well, I'm happy you did. I will return the favor and I will make sure that I don't see any more bullshit from you, because that's it. And I don't know if it's because people just don't do enough research into something. I mean, there's been times I've memed stuff out that's been completely inappropriate or inaccurate. And if someone calls me out on it, I will respond back in kind and say, hey, you're absolutely correct. That was wrong. That was inappropriate. Thank you for pointing that out to me. And I move on with my day, move on with my life. But that's just me. That's the kind of person I am. I'm not apologizing for what I said. I still stand by half of what I say. But I'm not going to get in an argument over something that I didn't verify that to be true. So I've removed tweets before. But anyhow, on to the most wonderful part of the evening, which is going to be me pulling up a little bit of information here. Give me just a little bit of, yeah, there we go. That sounds a little better. Now I can hear myself actually talk. I use this little microphone as a monitor. It tends to play through my earphones. So I'm not seeing any new information that's come out in the latest bit. It's just same Twitter BS. They're not really giving you much more information. You can pretty much say, yes, we already knew all this information was true. We knew what was happening. Everybody could pretty much agree with, yeah, they're basically quieting people. It's whenever you put your head in the sand and you don't ever realize, yeah, they're not telling you exactly what's going on. That, anyhow. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up the information, and it looks like we've got some of the Murdaugh family murders. I like to call him the the accused Lowcountry killer, because this man is from the Lowcountry. And if you saw the thumbnail that I created this with, you'll see what this man looks like. So let's see what these little guys have to actually say. We'll bring it up. And here we go. Let's see what they have to say about this. Judge is about to come in here shortly. Like I said, I pulled a little bit of this up just to make sure I didn't waste too much time on it. Judge comes in.
Motions. We are actually, as your Honor is aware, here last Friday in front of your Honor, very briefly, where we discussed some jury questionnaire issues, and we provided to the court a general jury questionnaire for the clerk to do with the summons. And also at the time, I discussed with Mr. Harpootlian the admissibility of any financial evidence. And so they, of course, filed a bill of particulars on Monday. And of course, we discussed at the time us doing a response on Wednesday, which we did. And so obviously we're here to address that as well. The defense has also filed some motions as it relates to a particular forensic report. And I believe we're here to discuss things about that as well. Starting out, Your Honor, with the bill of particulars, and of course we filed an objection, Your Honor.
So it sounds to me like they're basically just going over, bringing up a little bit of information of like these gentlemen, X, Y, or Z, filed some papers, and you know you're gonna this objection appears to me that he's basically going to say, oh, he's grandstanding or some BS like that, because you know we're talking about the South here. Everybody likes to grandstand in the South. They like to bloat themselves up to be bigger men than they actually are. Whenever, if you really think about it, both these nice, wonderful attorneys are probably about 5'4", and they really have an attitude. And yes, so far I have finished a good amount of this alcohol, but we're going to continue on with this because, hey, that's what we do here.
We filed the other motion first. I'd like to deal with the blood.
Wish I could bring the volume up.
Briefer, and then Mr. Griffin and Mr. Waters can go at it on the bill in particular.
We'll proceed with the motions in the order in which they were filed.
Thank you. Your Honor, we filed a motion basically to have this court have an evidentiary hearing on the so-called blood spatter evidence. And I want to walk the court through what we pieced together concerning how this was done. And let me say this.
Because I read the motion,
As the judge just basically said, you know, give me more information. You know, come on, stop with this. You know, you don't have to be all prim and proper on all of this.
including 11 pages of detailing all of that.
I think it's important, though.
Yeah, so basically he filed 11 pages of detailing the same thing that he wants to argue, and the judge is telling him, I don't want to hear all 11 pages. Give me a summary.
Because when I asked for an evidentiary hearing, I want to emphasize a couple of things.
All right.
And I'm not going to walk you through the scientific tests that were conducted. What we do know is this, that on the night of the murder, they took from Mr. Murdaugh his shirt, his shorts, and his shoes. They ran
As they should do.
tests on those items.
Yes.
And found a preliminary test indicated the presence of blood.
Yes.
And they cut out pieces and did DNA testing on those.
Yes.
There is some of the area which would become relevant as blood spatter. It is clear, two things are clear. One is that one of those spots of blood spatter was negative for Paul Murdaugh's DNA. Number two,
Okay.
the test run by SWED, which we did not get until a couple, 3 weeks ago, indicated no presence of blood, of human blood.
Of human blood.
If you're going to have somebody testify that there's blood spattered, I think part of that is there needs to be some blood. Now, critically,
So he is just pontificating right now. Because basically what he's saying is there might be been
yes,
found some
well,
blood.
I would say that
He's saying that they might have found some blood, but it may have not been human blood. And so they're pontificating right now. It's he's basically drawing this out as long as he can to basically get the judge. Basically, he wants to make sure that the judge doesn't allow this evidence in on this shirt that has some blood spatter. And they're basically going to say, well, there was no DNA on this one particular spot. Well, what about the rest of it? But he's going to allude that basically, you know, you'll see.
the state has indicated they're pondering that based on the evidence we come forward with and the difficulty. And I just want to make sure for the record it's clear that in the process of conducting these tests, SWED has destroyed the T-shirt for the purposes of examination. And the way
Yes, that's sort of what happens with a T-shirt. It's going to get destroyed for purposes of examination. Come on, make a good case why this evidence shouldn't be put in.
we became aware of that. Let me say this. I want to make this clear. In no way am I inferring any untoward, illegal, unethical, dishonest conduct on the part of the Attorney General.
Yes, he did, and he's going to. There we go.
I don't want that in any way to be inferred. I think he got those blood tests, the results of the blood tests, at the same time we got them. And we probably wouldn't have gotten them had he not asked to get all the reports through the attorney for SWED rather than going through the normal route.
So he just basically backed what he said he wasn't going to do.
Since the shirt had been destroyed, we went out and looked at it. We all, Mr. Zelenka, Mr. Waters, Father and I all went out and looked at it. And they could see it can't be tested again.
Of course, it can't be tested again. They only needed to test it once.
We wanted, and what key that was us wanting microscopic, and I'm not talking electron microscope, I'm just sort of use a magnifying glass basically to get the kind of photographs we wanted, that kind of detail. They couldn't do it. They can't do it, never will be able to do it. So
This is not a reason to throw out evidence.
as we looked at this further, Your Honor, we've done something in this case that most defense attorneys aren't able to or don't do.
We just pontificate and talk shit.
It's something we do routinely in a civil case, and that is to take the discovery and put it in a database, which is searchable. And in my office, Holly Miller, this young lady right here, actually is a genius that knows that. I mean, I couldn't find. Let's just say,
We don't need to know how you're boomering. We all fucking boomer. We don't need to hear about it. How about this? Get to your fucking point.
clear for the record. I in no way take any credit for using a database to find anything. That's way beyond my capabilities. But she found in something that was labeled a memorandum of interview with Kenny Hughes, the draft report of Mr. Bevel, their expert on blood spatter, in which he said there's no evidence of high velocity blood spatter.
This might be important, but I don't think so.
Not qualified. Now there's a PowerPoint that went with that. Apparently we haven't gotten. We've asked for, but he was unequivocal. No blood spatter.
Okay, so basically he's splitting hairs. No blood spatter, splitting hairs.
Blood spatter, high velocity blood spatter is created when you're near somebody and you shoot them, and there's this sort of spray.
Not necessarily.
Very, very small spray. So once we had that, we began asking questions and looking at the reports back from SWED. He was supported by that, by the DNA, which showed no call DNA in that area that we're talking about. And then we began going back to the report we got from the Attorney General a few months ago, the final report by Mr. Bevel, who is, by the way, not a forensic chemist. He's not anyway got any scientific degrees. He's a former police officer, and he looks at patterns and determines what they are. And
so right here, it sounds like they're trying to basically throw out this expert witness saying that he's not a forensic scientist. So we'll see how this ends up.
We looked at that. He said, "Oh yeah, this is blood spatter." So we then began looking at the SWED reports. What happened after they found out no blood spatter? Well, the chief officer in charge of this case, upon receiving that report, had a Zoom call with Mr. Bevel.
So it sounds to me like they're just trying to work out some sort of technicality to have this evidence thrown out which is going to show that there's DNA evidence from somebody or multiple people on this shirt. This is what it sounds like to me, that they're just basically trying to get something thrown out. We continue.
And Mr. Bevel said, would you mail me the shirt? And so I can look at it and confirm it can't be tested further. They said, no, we'll bring it to you. He said, no. All the time in federal court, they just mail it. They do a secure mailing. And they had actually offered to mail things to him, mail the shirt to him earlier. That was their offer, not his request. But they felt it was necessary for 2 SLED officers to fly out there. And what Mr. Bevel does, according to what we pieced together, is and by the way, all they have is a picture of the shirt. That's all he has, a picture of the samples in the shirt.
That's not all he has, or else you wouldn't be trying to get this evidence thrown out.
And again, this is outside my wheelhouse, photoshopped the shirt. His statement, photoshopped it to try to accentuate the little points. And in doing that, he now...
I'm going to say right now, there's a reason Photoshop does multiple things. You can actually draw on Photoshop. You can actually clear up the picture to make it, but it's an image. I don't know how the judge is going to rule on this. I'm assuming the judge is going to say, no, that evidence is going to still stand. It has nothing. They're going to show a picture, and it's as accurate as it's. I don't know the correct term for it because I'm not an attorney, but this really is irrelevant. This guy's just trying to find a reason for he's going to ramble on for probably a good, I would say, 10 minutes about this particular item that really isn't going to make any difference whatsoever.
Has an opinion. It was what's better. Now, Your Honor, we're gravely concerned about what happened between the SLED agents and their so-called expert on that trip, and we have no emails. We have no communications between them. We don't know what they discussed. And by the way, there were other, based on what we read, we believe there are other versions of this report we have not received.
So basically, they want to hear every single conversation that went on between them. Not that it's relevant, but they want to hear what the conversation might have been.
So there are other versions, emails, communications. Did they record the Zoom call? I mean, we do that routinely.
So I don't know where he's at in particular. I know that he's in South Carolina, but I know that some of the work I do, I actually have to record Zoom calls, and that basically is just for reference for me to go back to. But they're also, because it's dealing with a board, an executive board, that I can't release certain parts of those Zoom calls because that is privilege between particular parties. And it's already been agreed upon that, you have your open meeting where things are openly discussed, and you have private meetings that cannot be discussed because there's privilege in there. We'll see where he goes with this.
So we have a record of what this person said or that person said. In addition to that, I think it's telling that in this process of revising this report 180 degrees, that Mr. Bevel relied on this Photoshop process. So one of the things we have...
Photoshop does not change chemical components. So if, say, for example, I got blood all over me, and someone cuts out all the little pieces where the blood is so they can actually sample it for DNA, and they basically Photoshop, this is what the shirt looked like before because, well, we didn't think to take a picture before, and this is what it looks like after. That's Photoshop. I Photoshop a little bit here and there.
Thank you. Motion to file is a motion to compel the state to produce evidence regarding alteration of photographs of evidence it destroyed. In other words, they took these photographs. We can't photograph it. It's destroyed.
That makes no sense. So I took a picture of what I was getting ready to cut little samples out of, and they're nitpicking, saying that this product's already been destroyed. They cut all the little samples out of it, even though they took a picture of it before they uploaded it into Photoshop. That doesn't matter.
They somehow, in the process of doing the blood test, and again, we've got a hematologist that an expert said this is something that chemists, labs, crime labs do every day. The fact they destroyed it is so unusual that it boggles their minds. This is something they do. They can't destroy it testing it for blood because we have a right to test it.
The church still exists.
Okay. I'm not perfectly, an expert on this, but I will say that sometimes you have to destroy things to get the evidence off of it. It would be basically what he's saying is, imagine you've got a little spot of blood and they cut this little sample out of it and they take it off. Well, their argument is this little piece of evidence that they just cut off of this shirt and they used to sample it. They're pissed off because they didn't get to take that little sample and test it. It wouldn't matter. It was going to be destroyed regardless. They were taking a sample of it. You have the ability to examine the sample no different than what they took off, and you could examine it the same way. Just saying.
Or does it?
The shirt exists, but it is dark purple or black, and there's no way you can see detail of the threads. So it is for forensic purposes, and I think the state is not going to argue you can test it. Mr. Bevel said you can't test it after he saw it.
Of course you can't test it. You're an idiot.
Because it's been ruined for forensic purposes.
Yes.
It's whatever chemical treatments they put on it, they did wrong.
Oh, he's saying that how they tested it was wrong. Got it.
In the sense that it made it unusable after that.
No, that does not make it wrong. They could have done the test right. You just don't like what the test found. Look at a little chiggy baby over here. She's got some issues.
Now, Your Honor,
I think she's just as confused as I am.
so we made a motion to get, our first motion would be to compel the state to produce evidence regarding alteration of photographs and evidence it destroyed. And there's some very specific things on this Photoshop that we want the native Photoshop documents that they created, used, and then manipulated. We have very specific things we'd like. They exist, and we'd like the state to prove them so that we can see. I mean, prior to this Photoshopping, his opinion was no blood spatter. Then he Photoshops it, and now it is blood spatter, even though one of the points he finds on the shirt, he says now as part of the blood spatter, is negative, not negative, they exclude Paul Murdaugh as a contributor. So this becomes extremely important. The second thing that's important for us to do is to have an evidentiary hearing where the SLED folks that conducted the tests, the agents that went and met with Mr. Bevel, produce all their emails, produce all the communications, produce the Zoom if they have it, and any notes they have of those meetings. And if Mr. Bevel has notes of those meetings or emails or other communications, we'd like those too. I mean, Your Honor, this was leaked to the press a year ago that Al Murdaugh had Paul Murdaugh blood spatter, was the shooter because he had blood spatter. that, first of all, Swed will testify there's no blood. So I don't know any have blood spatter. Number two, the DNA spot would exclude Paul.
This is one DNA spot. That's all.
We believe that forensics is going to show that whoever shot Paul Murdaugh and basically blew his head off would be covered in blood, not just spattered. Now, we reached out to Mr. Bevel, wrote him a letter.
That is not true at all.
Said, here's the motions we filed. We'd like to talk to you. He got back to us yesterday.
This is a really weak argument by his defense.
Hand you a copy. From Mr. Bevel, in which he indicated he'd be I'm sorry, I handed you the wrong one.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Get your shit together, brother. Gave him the wrong email.
Let me see what I handed you. This was. No. This is the one I want to give you. See? Okay. I think I handed you that. I had two emails. Handed you the wrong one, Your Honor.
Oh, Jesus.
Your Honor, and what he says is, first, my apologies for not getting back to you sooner. We've been dealing with 2 deaths in our family, a week apart, with many things on hold. Our company policy is always.
She looks completely shocked.
About an active case. We always invite the opposing attorney to listen or be present for the interview, and have done so in this case. I've not heard back from possible open dates, but I'll be available when dates are identified. I assume you will allow us to talk to him and be present.
Absolutely, that's what we told you.
Okay. Secondly, Your Honor, we need an evidentiary hearing after we have a chance to talk to Mr. Bevel. We'd like to subpoena all these SWED folks to come testify, but we'd like to get the documents for Mr. Bevel.
The purpose of the hearing will be what?
Pardon?
What's the purpose of the
The
hearing?
purpose of the hearing, Your Honor, is to develop the basis to determine whether or not we want to make a motion to exclude the shirt. Right now, we think there's lots of stuff here.
This is a delay tactic. That's all.
For instance, under the Chiefborough case, we not only have to show they destroy the evidence.
Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. You're a horrible defense attorney. You need to have those things cited off the top of your head. This is a man's life that you're dealing with here. Just saying.
Alter the evidence, but we have to show it was done in bad faith. And that's why we need to ask what happened. Was it reckless? Was it beyond what's.
So I'm wondering hopefully this guy is not the guy that's going to be like asking questions, because this is going to be drawn out, because he's going to be asking really stupid questions that do not make a whole lot of sense.
Normal, what did they do wrong? And secondly, we can't develop that without talking to these folks at the minimum. And I'd like them under oath when we talk to them. Also on the Photoshop piece, we need to understand how he did it, so that we then can determine whether or not now that would be for a counsel hearing at a later date. I don't want a counsel hearing. I just need an evidentiary hearing to determine whether or not we have to hire additional experts.
You should already know what experts you're going to be bringing into a case.
You want this hearing for me to order them to produce information for us to then have another hearing, so that you can then determine whether you're going to file a motion to exclude evidence at trial. Evidence that I don't know will be the state intends to offer.
Well, by then, hopefully we'll get I know that the Attorney General is trying to work through this, and in his defense, I don't think he had a lot of this. I know he didn't have a lot of this before we had. Now, why that is?
How does he know what they didn't know? Because I know that they didn't know that it's possibility. Dude, stop fucking rambling. Get to the point. Make your point clear. Whenever you see a defendant a defendant's attorney making these kind of arguments, it's showing that they don't have a good case and they're basically just going to stonewall as long as possible.
I think he would give you a more benign explanation. But when I see a draft report saying it's not blood spatter hidden in a wrong file, and by the way, they said at some point, they said, we always had it. Again, we're getting a terabyte of data and looking for a needle in that terabyte haystack.
So I understand the motion. I'm going to give Mr. Waters an opportunity to respond to the motion.
So,
Who's making the motion?
yes, Your Honor. Am I done?
Yes, sir. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Judge, and may it please the court. Your Honor, I, of course, had a conversation with Mr. Harpootlian. I know last Friday, y'all were in with the jury in the trial that you were doing, and we had a chance to speak about this and about the motion that he's filed. And I would say that at this point, a ruling from Your Honor, I think, is premature, because what I expressed to Mr. Harpootlian then and what I've expressed here today is that we're in the process of assessing the viability of some of the information that's been gathered and how that affects this report, and ultimately whether or not it is anything the state intends to offer. I've expressed to them as well that I will fully advise them of that particular process and what we uncover and my decision and the reasons for that decision. And then at that time, assuming that there's even any more an issue to be had, that they could then litigate it at the time. What we've found out, unfortunately, is that that November report with the hemotrace was not provided to our office through the normal discovery. And in fact, I did not receive that report until last Wednesday, November the 30th, when I literally was at SLED attempting to figure out our response to the motions after it had been filed, of course, the day before Thanksgiving. I set up a meeting, we went out there, and literally was out there going, what report are we talking about? And that's when the report actually first really came to my attention.
What report are you referring to?
There is a November report, November 2021 report, Your Honor, in which SLED had tested various cuttings from the shirt with hemotrace, which tests for human blood, and that it did not identify human blood on those particular samples. And so just to back up a little bit, obviously the Attorney General's office was not involved in this case for the first 3 months. I did not get involved until September of 2021. The case at the time was with the 14th Circuit. In July of 2021, SLED forensics were looking at various things they could do to test the shirt, and they applied a substance which is very common and commonly used called LCV to the shirt, which reacts which can react with blood. And that's what they keep talking about it being destroyed. It's not destroyed. The shirt is still there. It's just that a consequence of that testing on the shirt is that it then becomes discolored. So it's kind of purple. That's actually what it does, is that you can see the alleged blood on there. During the course of that testing, after they did that, they then, I think subsequent to that, and bear with me, I guess in September, they then reached out to Mr. Bevel. And again, this was SLED doing this, reached out to Mr. Bevel.
Sorry, I had that muted. But these guys right here, he's pretty smart. This guy right here, he's pretty quick-witted. He's looking for any excuse to make sure that this is excluded, this information, and he needs to just shut the hell up. He needs to basically say, hey, this is where it's at. This is what's happening. This is part of the situation. We've got this. We've got X, Y, Z. This is how it relates to the case. Let the judge decide. Don't get too deep in the weeds whenever you're trying to argue this kind of stuff. it's going to fly over everybody's head.
To get him to ultimately review the case. And then that process went forward. The Attorney General's office, we had no involvement in any of the interaction with Bevel. The only involvement that I did actually have during the process of dealing with Mr. Bevel was when they actually called me and said, hey, Mr. Bevel says that we can mail the shirt. And I said, no, you ain't mailing no shirt. This case is too important. I want it always in the custody, direct custody of a law enforcement officer.
And that's not
So
a
that
bad
was what I said
idea.
at that time, but it was more about just the importance of this case and ensuring that a major piece of evidence didn't get lost in the mail, or something else happened that would affect the chain of custody and the security of that evidence.
Is it anticipated that Mr. Bevel will be a witness in the case?
Well, and so ultimately, when this report has come to light, the first thing that I did, of course, was talk to the SLED experts and talk to Mr. Bevel. And I said, how do we assess this? Is this, how does this affect the report? Is it going to undermine at least that aspect of the report? Is it going to, the conclusions are still there, but maybe not as strong? Or is it something that we need to not pursue? And obviously, I immediately started to ask SLED to begin that process of determining the effect of that evidence. And that process is ongoing. We had meetings with them yesterday where I sent some of my folks out there to do that, to assess the effect of this human trace. And there's a number of factors to consider. There's a number of factors to consider as to the dilution, as to the location, as to possible reaction to LCD to the human trace test, in order to determine whether or not there is any significant possibility of a false negative on those tests. And that's exactly
the answer is yes, no, or you don't know yet.
The answer is that we do not know yet. And that's what I've told Mr. Harpootlian. I told him Friday and today. Mr. Bevel, the email that you just got, unfortunately has been out of pocket. And
So the information is actually being passed between him and him. The judge is blind to this information. He doesn't know. He wants him to explain that he has been communicating with him and that they've been discussing all of this information back and forth. There's a reason why they want to make sure that this bit of information is not in there. We will find out. More than likely, I would say the judge is going to say, unless you can prove there's no reason for it to not be in there, then we're going to allow this information in.
I want to do that same process in assessing whether or not the effect of this report on his ultimate conclusion. He unfortunately, because of deaths in the family, has been out of pocket. But as I've told the defense, the second that I get reasoned answers to the science of this, I will assess whether or not what that means to the viability of this evidence. I will, of course, advise the defense, and in the event that we decide that it's still viable in some way or form or fashion, then at that time, I think it would be appropriate for them to litigate however they want to litigate the issue. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
What is your response to his motion to compel the communications and all of the other?
We have and are providing every. I'm sorry. We have and we are providing every single thing related to Bevel to the defense, and in fact, again, that's how some of this stuff, has ultimately come to light. So I don't think there's any need for any motion to compel, because anything that we have that's Bevel related, they're going to have, and anything about this process, they're going to have, and reasons for any decision that I make, they're going to have, and then again, they can bring that to your court. They're unsatisfied.
I think the basis for the motion is that they do not currently have it and they want it.
And again, I believe that we've provided every single thing that we have, and there's nothing Bevel related that we are withholding, that we intend to withhold. And again, this is an open book process with the defense. They will understand the reasons for my decision, and they can respond accordingly at that time. But I think it's appropriate that we give time for the scientists to assess the science and to ultimately come up to whatever conclusion that is. They'll advise me of that. I'll advise the defense of that, as well as my decision. It may be that this is a non-issue.
Your Honor, two things. One,
That's a very good point. It might not be, might not matter.
In addition, and I'm not sure that we've gotten everything from them. And let me say this, we've asked for phone stuff. We got stuff last night, phone records that we asked for 3 months ago. We got a trial 5 weeks from now. And, I don't particularly want to be litigating this over the week before Christmas, the week after Christmas. We've got work to do. So we'd ask Your Honor to order the state to provide us everything Mr. Bevel has all his notes, any communications he had. Your Honor, let me put this in context for you. Mr. Bevel goes around the country testifying about blood spatter. He testified in Indiana in a case named Cann, C-A-N-N. The jury acquitted the man. He said definitely had the blood spatter of his wife and dead children on it. They did put, there's a national system to look for DNA, which they state then did. They have not done in this case. And they identified a guy named Boney, arrested him, and convicted him. But for some of the experts we've been talking to questioning Mr. Bevel's art, and for it's not a science. That young man would have been convicted and doing life, going to the electric chair. So this is critical.
So he's bringing up something of another case that is irrelevant in this case. This is not a winning way to get the judge to rule in your favor. If you're saying, well, you know, this case over here, this one over here, that one over there, this one, that one. We're talking about this case right here. So let's focus on this case right here.
Critical because this blood spatter, this guy's not a scientist. He looks at something and gives it sort of a Rorschach test. He had originally looked at it and said, nah, no blood spatter. Then he photoshops it and said, yeah, blood spatter. We need to understand why he changed his mind. And we'd like to, we ultimately, we need this evidence to get in a position. We're going to assume that he's going to go forward with it. But we can't wait until he makes his decision to get this information to begin working, to get ready for, maybe we won't have a hearing, but we need to be ready if we do. And we're 5 weeks out now.
Right. Anything else on this motion? Yes, sir.
Very quickly, Your Honor, a couple of things. Number one, I believe, I don't have custody or control of Mr. Bevel's notes. He's not a state actor. I do have, and we have provided every communication that I'm aware of between SLED and Mr. Bevel, as well as the drafts and everything else. So I'm not aware of anything outstanding. But Your Honor, we're not going to withhold
Dude, get out of the fucking weeds.
anything in that regard. Secondly, he mentioned some stuff that was provided yesterday. That was some of the stuff that came from the 14th Circuit, but it is my understanding it's duplicates that we're providing out of abundance of caution in that regard. In any event, Your Honor, again, there's nothing I don't believe that is Bevel related that we possess that we have not already provided to the defense. And if I uncover anything else, first people that will get it will be him.
Which is proper.
There's two things. There's a PowerPoint referred to in the original Bevel report in which he says no blood spatter. We don't have that. There are, we have very specific information we want on the whatchamacallit that he did of the blood spatter, the Photoshop. We need that for our experts to be able to analyze whether or not, this is voodoo science or whether this is the real thing. And again,
You're going to hear probably during this case, he's going to be talking about voodoo science. We'll see.
This is a guy who goes around the country doing this and has been wrong in the past. So we need that information.
I've heard that.
So basically, before the judge, he's trying to call out things that he believes that this guy has said that were wrong because of other cases that he may have testified in. And I believe the person that they're bringing in to testify may have not been quite accurate in his depiction of what is blood spatter, what is a reason for them to discard this evidence. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, just could be that they're trying to basically call into question what this person has to say.
That's on the issue, motions and what's at stake, and I reviewed your motion. I grant the motion to compel you to prepare a proposed order and share it with Mr. Waters, and I'll review it and issue a written order.
Thank you.
Based on that.
Thank you, Judge.
So basically what the judge said is, I want you to create an order for them to compel any evidence that you might have. So if prosecutor has any evidence, they're telling him, give us the evidence, but this is basically a nothing burger.
the next motion, of course, is deals with the bill of particulars as well as the state's alternative motion in limine for admission of evidence as to the various exceptions under 404B, such as motive, intent, common scheme of plan, identity. And we had a conversation again last Friday about that, and ultimately discussed the fact that they would file a bill of particulars, to which we responded. We ultimately, in our response, object procedurally to the bill of particulars as not a viable procedural mechanism under South Carolina law, but take the position, alternatively, though, that this is an issue that we need to assess with the court as we move forward because of how important it is to the case. And of course, file a detailed response that Your Honor would have yesterday. And the reason for that is, Your Honor, is that in this particular case, where you have a man who was accused and indicted for the murder of his own wife and son, that motive might be the most important fact that any jury would want to know. It's not an element of the offense, but it is the most important fact that any jury is going to want to know in this case.
Oh, they're going to get into some harsh stuff. And you notice that two gentlemen there switch chairs because this guy right here, he is going to argue what he's presenting. Just pay attention. This is going to be interesting.
And for a jury to understand that, for them to really understand what the motive is in this particular case, they're going to have to understand that there was a huge difference between who Alec Murdaugh professed to be to the outside world and how important that was to him as a central figure in this prominent family, and who he really was, that only he knew, that no one else knew. Over and over again, I've interviewed witnesses or put witnesses on the stand and who thought that they knew this man, and they over and over again said, I didn't know him. I didn't know who this man was. And so for a jury to understand that, they're going to have to understand not only that distinction between who he professed to be and who he was, and how important that was to him, but also how that allowed him to avoid accountability for defrauding victims of almost $9 million since 2011.
And this is where it becomes very important because they're going to be talking about this guy right here that has basically been scamming a lot of money out of a lot of people and how that is relevant to him killing his wife and his son. So this is about to get a little bit spicy. I can imagine that there's going to be some questions raised by this guy right here, and he's going to try to make an argument of why this guy right here should not be prosecuted.
That we've been able to detect. I think when this case started, a lot of people assumed that this was a murder case, and then a few months later, there was some white collar thrown in there. But the reality is we have done this extensive investigation, state grand jury investigation. We've realized that this is a white collar case that culminated with two murders.
And this is where it becomes very important because basically what they're saying is what the prosecutor is saying is this murder case wasn't them finding out about a white collar case. There was a white collar issue going on. There was a criminal activity going on that culminated in the murder of a man and a woman perpetrated by this guy right here. We'll see.
And so if you look at the development of this particular case and the evidence in this particular case, what we see is that the defendant in the late 2000s, and that's a long time to go back, and I recognize that, Your Honor, but I think the important point to realize is that this is an unbroken chain of constant lies and misappropriations and thefts that has been going on for so long, a hamster wheel on which this man has been on constantly, having to borrow, to earn, to steal millions of dollars just to keep kicking the can down the road and staying above water, an exhausting hamster wheel. A slow burn that was heating up until June the 7th, 2021. And it all started with some land deals in 2008, 2007, 2008. The recession hit, and he really ended up upside down on those land deals. And it materially changed his financial picture.
Dude, you need to stop with the motherfucking mouth twitch, because it does not look good for you.
The reason why we know that, Your Honor, is that an early part of this past.
I don't know if you caught that. Let me back this up a little bit. She's going to be looking over at him because she notices it. She notices the little twitch.
2008, 2007, 2008, the recession hit.
Right there. She spotted it, and she's like, "Oh shit!"
And he really ended up upside down on those land deals.
She's going to have a talk with him after this is done. I'm telling you, she knows that this guy is doing some shady shit.
And it materially changed his financial picture. The reason why we know that, Your Honor, is that an early part of this past decade, in 2011, he had some big cases. He had the Pinky case. He had the Thomas case. He had the Badger case. And these cases, the people around him thought, they knew he had some.
Man, this woman, you need defense. You need to get her out of here because she is not doing any good. She is noticing all of the little tells that he's given off, and she knows. She knows what the fuck is going on.
Issues and had some problems, but they thought that those recoveries and those really high fees that he had obtained, 6 figures or more, had fixed the financial problems that Alec Murdaugh had. But they didn't. They weren't enough. And not only did he have huge fees from those particular cases, but he also stole money from the clients as well. Your Honor, if I look at the unbroken chain that I'm talking about here of these thefts that went on, they start in 2011. And every single year from 2011 to 2021, he stole money from clients. It is an unbroken chain.
Girl, you do not need to be sitting here. This is not looking good for you. This is not looking good for you, brother. Because she's looking at you going, "Oh shit." These guys already know, because it's already been proven he's been fired. He has done some shady shit. And he's trying to look as innocent as he can, but she doesn't buy it. These guys are just like, "We're just trying to protect this guy. You need to get Chicky Baby out of here. You really do."
Because even though he was making 6 and sometimes 7 figures of legitimate income in his law practice, it was not enough to sustain the lifestyle that he had and the debts that he had. Even though he was borrowing millions of dollars from Palmetto State Bank, from his buddy Russell Lafitte, borrowing close to $1 million from his law partner, borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars from his father, borrowing hundreds.
This guy right here knows that he can get away with a lot of this shit. He doesn't feel anything about it.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars from Russell Lafitte's father. Having Russell Lafitte loan him close to $1 million from the Plyler money, for which he had Russell appointed conservator. It still wasn't enough. it wasn't enough to keep Alec Murdaugh's head above water. And it couldn't stop. It couldn't stop. I've detailed in the filing, and Your Honor is generally familiar with the state grand jury evidence of the 4 manners in which he was stealing money, including from his own family and his law firm. And he had been doing that for a long time.
So I can imagine right now that defense is saying, yeah, we can argue this stuff all day, that that we need to exclude this kind of evidence.
But one thing happened that caused the slow burn to finally heat up. And that was the boat case in February of 2019. Your Honor, I've done a lot of white collar crime, and like,
Son, let me tell you right now, that is not a good look. Whenever you've got the prosecutors saying, I've done a lot of white collar crime, you might want to reword that. Just saying.
every Ponzi scheme, theoretically, a Ponzi can last forever as long as there's new money. But the second that money stops or slows down, it's inevitably going to crash and burn. And that is what the boat case meant here. That is what the boat case meant here. And so what we see after the boat case is we see a huge uptick in the amount of money that he is stealing. And the biggest one of that is the Satterfields. And that one's different because he's actually the defendant in that particular case. He's not the plaintiff's attorney there. And what he does is conspire with his buddy, Corey Fleming, to get a recovery against his own insurance company for her fall at his house. And then has Corey Fleming write the check out to the fake Forge account. $2.9 million. And unlike prior to the boat case, where he's able to pull off a sleight of hand of stealing money from clients in plain sight with stuff on the disbursement forms and the sheets that they're signing, because at the same time, he's handing them a huge check of life-changing money, and they're shaking his hand as they walk out the door. Here, with the Satterfields, after the boat case, he takes it off.
Look a little more into this, and you're going to see that he was not only creating fraudulent insurance claims, he was also stealing from his law firm. I don't know if they're going to bring this up, but from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but he was stealing from his law firm.
He takes every dime. Every dime. What does that mean? Well, one thing it means is that he doesn't have that umbrella policy anymore. And so the boat case becomes very significant because the plaintiffs in the boat case made it very clear that this was not just about recovering from an insurance company or recovering from the deep pockets of the convenience store or the bar. The plaintiffs wanted a specific personal recovery from Alec Murdaugh because they believed, like everyone, that he had a lot of money.
So right now, defense is looking at this, and they're seeing what his opening statement is going to be. This guy's overplaying his hand. He needs to just calm it down, provide actual law to the judge, so the judge will decide what's going on.
And it was the principle of the thing that they wanted him to pay. Personally, if there was going to be any settlement. And as that time went on, the boat case plaintiffs made it very clear to Alec Murdaugh's civil attorneys that we want a personal recovery from Alec Murdaugh. And his attorneys finally tell them, and they say, he doesn't have any money. And they're incredulous. They don't believe that because, like everyone, they believe he's very wealthy. And they file a motion to compel to disclose his accounts, disclose his finances, disclose all of that. That hearing is initially set for May of 2021. And it gets continued because Mr. Murdaugh's attorney, John Tiller, who's of course deceased now, was having medical treatments.
Oh, that's interesting.
What else is going on at this time? We're in now the spring of 2021. Well, state grand jury subpoenas are being issued as well about the boat case. out in Hampton and Colleton counties. And what else is going on at this particular time? Alec Murdaugh has an opportunity for a big recovery in a case he has with Chris Wilson. And he actually argues and agrees to get the defendants, who are a big automotive company, and he gets them to agree to what seemed like a really good move at the time. He gets them to say he's going to waive punitive damages if they waive the right to appeal. So that it's going to be bench tried, and so whatever decision is made, bench tried on just damages, then that money is going to be instantly available. That might seem like a good strategic move, but the reality is that Alec Murdaugh needs that money right now. Because the way the law firm works is that you don't get your bonus until the end of the year. And other than that, you just get a $125,000 salary spread out over the course of the year. For a person that the second he gets an infusion of cash, high six figures, it's gone within months. So that case happens. The judge issues his ruling, and ultimately it's a pretty good recovery, and there's $792,000 in fees for Mr. Murdaugh. But what he does is he convinces his co-counsel in that case to write those fees directly to him instead of writing it to the firm. And why is that? So that he can get that money right away and bypass the firm where it's supposed to go.
All right, this can work out for him really well, but I'm sorry, if you're a prosecutor, you need to really narrow it down to the point, because you do not want to lose your judge. You do not want to waste the court's time with this kind of BS, because it makes you look like you don't have a good case. If you've got a good case against this guy, bring up your case, make your case, and say this is BS or whatever you need to say. But yeah, don't waste the court's time. It doesn't impress them at all.
And so he does that. $750,000, and it's gone within a very, very short period of time. In May of 2021, though, his staff, Mr. Murdaugh's staff, becomes suspicious because they get the expense check and they don't have the fee check. And they call up the other attorney's office and they say, "Where's the fees?" And initially, apparently, he was like, "Well, we gave it to Ellen." And then they're trying to...
This prosecutor needs to really get on with it.
Figure it out, and they can't get a satisfactory answer. And they go up and talk to financial staff, and they're trying to get a straight answer, and they can't get a straight answer. And one of the attorneys calls that other attorney, and they can't seem to figure it out. Where are these fees? Where is $792,000 in fees? He's already gotten it. He's already spent it. He doesn't have the means to pay it back. So what happens?
So I, started following this case a little bit because of my lovely wife, and she brought it to my attention. And so basically, it looks like he was involved in some other shady businesses that were going on that are very, very illegal. And these people wanted their money. So we'll see where this goes.
On June 10th, all of this is finally coming to a head. That morning, a PMPED staffer comes in the office at the direction of the partners and says, "Alec, I need an answer today. Where is that money? I need an answer."
Where's the money, boy? Where's the money? Show me the money.
Today. And Alec is in his office working on the boat case because that hearing is scheduled for June 10th. And Judge Hall has made it very clear there's going to be no more continuances. And that's going to expose everything as well. And the only thing that stops the conversation about "I need an answer right now" is that Alec, unfortunately, gets a call that Mr. Randolph had gone to the hospital with a very poor prognosis. His father, who repeatedly had loaned him hundreds of thousands of dollars when he needed it. all of those are happening on this very day. It's a day of reckoning for him. The very day that Maggie and Paul were murdered.
You have to understand that you also have to be able to place Maggie and Paul in the same place as the man that you're accusing of killing them. Just because you say, hey, you know, this guy, everything was falling apart, he was doing some shady business, you still have to tie him to that particular location at that particular time. I don't know if the prosecutor is going to be able to do that in this, but we'll see. We'll see what he has to say.
And what happens in the wake of that? What happens is the exact opposite happens. Everybody immediately rallies to his aid. Immediately, that hearing is canceled. It's not even rescheduled anytime soon. The PED people would be, the last thing they're worried about is where these fees are. They don't care about that anymore. They're all rallying to his aid. All of the things that were about to happen stop. And what does he do in the interim? One of the first things he does, at least business-wise, is get more money from one of his law partners, get more money from Russell Laffitte from Palmetto State Bank in order to send enough money to Chris Wilson that Chris Wilson will then send it to PMPD and say, yeah, those fees were there the whole time. Everything's cool. He covers his tracks. And that would have never happened if it wasn't for the deaths of Maggie and Paul. It would have never happened. And the only thing that changed was that in September, a PMPED staffer happened to find a copy of the check that was written from the other lawyer directly made out to Alec. And she knew right then that he had been lying about it. And she takes it to another staffer, and that triggers another staffer to think about some other forged checks that had been made out that didn't seem quite right. And they go look at those checks, and then they run it through the system, and all of a sudden all the forged checks start popping out. And they go and take it to the partners, and they're like, oh my God, he's been stealing from us. He's been stealing from clients.
Well, no shit.
They eventually confront him, and he resigns. That's September 3rd. September 4th, his best friend, who he had convinced to send back those fees to PMPED, but to cover $192,000 with his own money that Alec couldn't borrow enough to pay, is trying to get a hold of him and finally gets to meet with them on the doorstep or on the front porch of Alec's mother's house. And Alec confesses to him that he's been using pills and that he's been stealing.
Huh.
And he doesn't have the $192,000. And all that accountability is starting to crash down on Alec again.
Come on. Bring it home.
Within a couple of hours,
Give me more
that
information.
conversation with his best friend confronting him about the $192,000, Alec is the victim on the side of the road.
But is he? Is he really the victim? You tell me.
And instantly everybody rallies to his aid again. Accountability is coming on him, and suddenly there's a gunshot and he's a victim again. And everybody rushes to his aid again, except this time it doesn't take long for people to figure out that something's not right. But the symmetry there is very, very.
So let me ask, her or her? Brunette, blonde? Just asking.
Your Honor, this is an unbroken chain of financial crimes that highlight what has happened here. This is a white-collar case that culminated in murders, and we've cited a number of cases in here of very, very similar circumstances in which courts have admitted evidence and motive just like this. And I would actually point to one case that we cited, and this is the Siegel case, And this was written, I believe, by Judge Traxler on the Fourth Circuit. And there's a number of cases that we cited in our brief.
Come on, give us something good.
And this is a quote from that particular case. Because Siegel had been defrauding multiple victims for the last at least 20 years and had never taken such extreme action, it is particularly important for the government to be able to explain to the jury why it was suddenly necessary for Siegel to resort to murder.
This girl is not helping him out a whole lot. And I'm telling you, if his defense has her sitting next to him communicating, it is not going to look good for him. I'm just saying, it does not look good from here. It's not going to look good for him.
This is not propensity evidence. Evidence of all this fraud and abuse of his law license is not propensity evidence. It doesn't show that he's more likely to engage in fraud, because murder is a much different thing than fraud. But what it does show is what may be the most important fact in this entire case, and that is why this particular individual would murder his own wife and son. And the answer is because it allowed him to escape the accountability that was coming upon him that he never had to deal with in his entire life. Never had to deal with it in his entire life. And it worked. It worked. And if it wasn't for that check showing up in September, it might be still working.
You have to understand that this guy right here, he is an attorney. He can put on a stone face. So if you see him getting nervous, you know that they're hitting close to home.
I think the case law is clear, Your Honor, that this is admissible evidence. In this particular case, because of how important motive is and how singularly important it is to the jury, particularly when you have an individual accused of killing his own family members, where there's typically an affectionate relationship, the probative value far outweighs any prejudicial effect. And I would also point out that all of this is established by more than clear and convincing evidence, which is part of the standard as well. All of this, the vast majority of it, is the subject of state grand jury indictments, the subject of evidence that's been gathered by subpoena, sworn testimony, and it's already out there in all of these indictments. So the prejudicial effect is minimal, but the probative value is extreme in explaining what led this to happen.
So give us the 10-cent version of this, because I think you just basically talked a bunch of garbage to the judge, and you could have just said, this guy's a flight risk.
And that was that the day of reckoning was upon him, and he was out of cards to play after he's been playing every card he could for 10 years. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, Your Honor, I thought we were going to argue these motions in the order they were filed. I filed our motion for bill of particulars, but I didn't interrupt Mr. Waters because, frankly, the things that he was saying really conformed to our request for bill of particulars. And the reason that we had asked for a bill of particulars is because, as Your Honor knows, that character evidence, evidence of bad acts, other criminal conduct is not admissible in a criminal trial to prove that the person is a bad person, that the person is a criminal.
And he's right there. You can't admit that kind of stuff, but it can show cause.
The person probably committed this crime because of his bad character and his bad behavior.
No, but if you can tie other crimes that are being committed by that particular person, then you can basically say, he's basically stealing from Tom to, pay off Harry. But if he doesn't have to pay Harry anymore, he kills off him, removes him from the equation so he doesn't have to pay him anymore. If you can tie the crimes together, and I think that's what the prosecutor is trying to do. I could be wrong, but I think the prosecutor is basically trying to tie him in to other crimes so he can bring that evidence in. And this is a really good move by the defense to say, just because he did bad stuff doesn't mean that he's a bad person.
And, Your Honor, the first 10 minutes of Mr. Waters' argument and the first page of his memo goes to exactly that. The first page of his memo says, to properly evaluate motive, the jury will need to understand the distinction between who Alex Murdaugh appeared to be to the outside world, a successful lawyer and scion of the most prominent family in the region, and who he was in real life. Only he fully knew, an alleged crooked lawyer and drug user who borrowed money and stole wherever he could to stay afloat. He's a bad guy, Judge. Jury needs to know he's a bad dude. And because he's a bad dude, we wouldn't put it past him to kill his wife and son. And that is the exact reason that we have Rule 404B and our rules of evidence. In South Carolina, we're lucky that we have the seminal case of State v. Lyle that is cited all around the country. And it's essentially precursor to the federal rule 404B and our rules of 404.
So, prosecutor, you need to get your shit together. Basically, what he's saying is, you provided all this information, but you better be able to come up with a better rule other than saying, well, he's just a bad person, so we need to prosecute him.
And I just would like to quote a little bit from State v. Lyle, and it points to the reason that this character evidence of other criminal conduct is not admissible generally, and it says proof that the defendant has been guilty.
And you notice that he just sort of brushed over generally.
Guilty of another crime equally heinous prompts to a ready acceptance of and belief in the prosecution's theory that he is guilty of the crime charged. It's the facts as to predispose the mind of the juror to believe that the prisoner guilty and thus effectively strips him of the presumption of innocence. Now, the State v. Lyle and our rules I've developed, and there are exceptions. One is motive. But State v. Lyle is very instructive on the level of proof you have to make to get to the exception.
But the question is, are they providing that proof? That's what the defense is asking. Are you able to prove that this is tied to it?
And I'll just quote, the acid test to get to the exception is its logical relevancy to the particular accepted purpose or purposes for which it's sought to be introduced. Lyle goes on to say, the dangerous tendency and misleading probative force of this class of evidence of other crimes, require that its admission be subject to the court's to rigid scrutiny. And
he's right. You should have it to rigid scrutiny.
Including in Lyle, it says, hence, if the court does not clearly perceive the connection between the extraneous criminal transaction and the crime charge, that is its logical relevancy, the accused should be given the benefit of the doubt and the evidence should be rejected. That's State v. Lyle. And so, Your Honor, in their response to our motion for bill of particulars, they say, we've known all of this since we had it available since January of 2022, that he's been charged in 18 indictments over 90 separate counts, and we've been given discovery on that. And all that is true. And we have all that.
Okay. So basically what he's trying to argue from what I can gather, and I'm not an attorney, but basically what he's trying to say is, yeah, he's done some other shady stuff, but that should bear no relevance, and we shouldn't be able to bring that information into the court. Or now what they're trying to do is eliminate information of prior crimes that he's done, saying that they're not relevant to this case of murder. And what the prosecutor's trying to say is it's very relevant to the prosecution of this because it was a culmination of him doing bad deeds prior led up to the point that he is going to commit murder.
And it's a universe of information, and he gave a great opening, closing, whatever argument he wants to give to the jury to point and paint Mr. Murdaugh as a bad guy. But the most important part of our motion for bill of particulars was to identify that universe of evidence you intend to offer at trial, and how is it relevant? What is it? How does it meet the acid test?
So what he's saying is basically all the bad stuff that he's done prior shouldn't be admitted into evidence. That's all that he's saying. And I'm speaking as layman because I'm not an attorney and I don't know.
The logical relevancy to the particular exception. Your motive.
What page is that on your motion?
On my motion.
Motion that for bill of particulars.
Well, I'm responding to his argument, Your Honor, but in our motion for bill of particulars.
So basically what they're saying is the judge, don't bring any of this other information in because it's basically going to prejudice the jury. That's what he's saying in a lot of long words.
I thought you were citing from your motion that you're.
No, sir. I was not. I was reading from State Law.
All right.
Acid test. But
I will say the judge's response is pretty good in this because the judge is looking at this going, yeah, you can argue it, but I think the judge has already made up his mind.
But we did ask in the bill of particulars to tell us what your motive is, what your theory of motive is. And they had a 20.
Isn't that what he just did?
He did. And we're frankly satisfied with that. We've gotten what we want. Now what he did last night, well, Wednesday night at 11:55, he sent us an unfiled response and his own motion. And
because he's actually allowed to. And the judge is going to see through this. This right here is a defense playing up basically for the camera. That's all that this is.
Asking for this court to rule that all of that universe of information is admissible. And frankly, Your Honor, we haven't had an opportunity to fully respond to that. I'm here to.
He has had ample amount of time to respond to it because I don't know how it works in South Carolina, but here in Georgia, for example, if I file a motion, there's a certain period of time between when I file that motion and someone has to respond. Once they hit that point of response, they should have already filed a response, and sometimes they will file that response on the 23rd hour. Like, if it has to be done by a certain period of time, then what's going to happen is basically you're saying, hey, I've filed this right here. You've got a certain period of time, and you usually will calendar it in. And just because you filed your response at the very last minute does not mean that you did not have that information beforehand.
Respond to his arguments on that, but we would like an opportunity to fully brief what they have, their motion that they filed and we got yesterday.
But they had opportunity because both parties could have filed a response at any given point in time between, let's just put this for example. If the court rule says that you have to have your briefs in by December 1st, and the judge rules on that on November 1st. He says, by December 1st, I want to have your responses filed in. the way that the court rules is basically saying that you have to file your response by this date. And that's irregardless of what somebody else's motions or responses might be. If you're responding to a response, it doesn't matter. The judge has said, you put your brief in, you tell me what you're going to say by this specific date. So defense had plenty of time to file their motion, to make their case, to plead their case before the court, but they didn't do that. And what he's trying to argue, and the judge is going to see right through, and he's basically going to deny it, is that you don't like what they have to say. Well, you had plenty and ample time to file your own response.
So, and I understand that, as I indicated, we would take the motions in the order filed, and the motion for bill of particulars was a second motion filed, I believe. Mr. Waters started arguing number 4, which is his motion to eliminate.
Right.
It's all combined now with your motion for bill of particulars. Are you still, what do you want me to do with this motion for bill of particulars?
Your Honor,
Give me a good reason to rule against prosecutor.
satisfied if his response is that's what they intend to introduce and that's their theory of motive he puts on the record, we're satisfied with our bill of particulars, because we have asked and now we have heard what the connection is, what their theory of motive is, and I'm happy to address his arguments and why that theory of motive that's on page 13 to shift focus away from himself and buy additional time to try and prevent financial crimes from being uncovered, how that's unprecedented. There's never a case you would find that says that is the logical, that meets the acid test of logical relevance.
I guarantee you there's plenty.
So,
Let me address your motion for bill of particulars. When I started practicing law 48 years ago now, in the state of Ohio, it was routine to file a motion for bill of particulars. Every defendant would file that routinely, and the state had to file a response. That's Ohio. Now South Carolina, and in the state's response, that's not a motion that's recognized by this state.
Ouch! Come on, Judge. Slap it down.
Do you agree with that?
it's not standard, Your Honor.
The judge knows the law in the state of South Carolina. This particular prosecutor does not, this defendant is playing dumb, but clearly he's been practicing law enough that the judge just called him out. And I mean, the judge just whipped out 9 inches and just slapped him in the face.
I think the court has the authority to order it.
You all cited some cases from maybe 1830 or back in slavery time and beyond. But it's not a motion that is recognized under current South Carolina jurisprudence.
Oh, the judge just brought the beat down on the defense.
In response, the state has outlined what they would like to offer as far as evidence in support of motive in response to your motion for bill of particulars. Having responded in the manner the state has, then it renders the motion for bill of particulars moot, basically, the motion.
Oh, crushed.
So I want the record to be clear. I'm not trying to set a precedent in South Carolina or lawyers in every case to file a motion for bill of particulars because it's not recognized under South Carolina law, so I'm not, so you are, in effect, we're deeming this motion to be moot and based on the state's response. So that deals, in effect, with the motion number 2, not necessarily with Mr. Waters' counter motion, which he included in response to your motion for the particulars.
Yes.
Oh, I would love to shoot some hoops with
That
this
takes care of
judge.
number 2.
Well, Mr. Harpootlian combined, the first motion was for the motion about the sheriff, second motion was motion to compel the discovery. The third motion was the motion to unshackle Mr. Murdaugh, which he is unshackled here in the courtroom, and we appreciate that. I think
Is
that's,
there anything else we need to address on that issue?
no, Your Honor.
Your Honor, just for clarity of the record, obviously, we filed a response. I'm well aware of the case law out there, and I'm not going to spike this case for the appellate issue, which generally says that a defendant should not be shackled in front of the jury. As always, if specific security issues arise that are expressed to me by law enforcement or the SLED agents responsible for his security, I'll
Yes.
make that aware to the court for a decision at that time.
Guy's already tried to have himself yeeted.
Well, defense has certainly done a lot of research and cited my own case from 2008 or whatever year that was,
Ooh,
addressing the
harsh.
issue of defendants not being shackled, and that was a death penalty case. So defendants generally just are not shackled or should never be shackled in the presence of the jury. This motion goes beyond that to address not solely before a jury, but before the media, in effect.
Yeah,
And
there you go, Judge.
I agree with that motion to the extent that the defendant should not be put in a position where he visibly appears to be shackled, that could be projected out to potential jurors in this case. And I
Good call on the judge.
sent word to law enforcement that they need to address that issue so that that appearance won't be given. So that issue is being addressed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah.
So that's that motion.
And yes, sir.
Okay. So come on, give us something more.
The fourth motion would be their counter motion to our bill of particulars that, Your Honor, we just.
Judge already ruled on that.
Yes,
You need to get over it.
He's argued it. I would like to respond to his argument, but we would like an opportunity to further brief it since we just got here.
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Your Honor. Very quickly, in response to some of the presentation from Mr. Griffin, he talks about the acid test.
Your Honor, I haven't finished. I'm not finished.
Okay. Well, you hold on, because this guy right here, I hadn't finished, but of course they had already asked, and I'll back it up because I'm telling you right now that he basically sat down and now all of a sudden he's going to jump up and go, "Oh no, I haven't finished." So watch this. Watch the interaction here, what the judge has to say. And he's going to sit down and he's going to say, well, they're going to present their case. And then all of a sudden he's going to jump up and say, "Oh, I haven't finished."
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Your Honor. Very quickly,
So the judge just called on him to go ahead and speak. He's going to start sitting down and all of a sudden he's going to jump up to interrupt.
in response to some of the presentation from Mr. Griffin, he talks about the acid test.
Your Honor, I haven't finished.
Oh, now you hadn't finished.
I'm not finished my response.
Yeah, the question is, should you need to respond since you're having an opportunity to digest and research it and prepare a complete response? And first, the other question is a motion, in effect, it's a motion in limine by the state for me to order evidence to be admissible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the reverse from the way motions in limine are typically utilized. It's generally to exclude evidence, not to include evidence. But you need time to respond to that, and that's certainly understandable. It came in late yesterday.
And Your Honor, again, I would just say that when we just talked Friday, when you were in with the jury, that was kind of what we discussed. They were going to file the bill of particulars, I respond, and then we were asked for this hearing here today. So that was my understanding, as we were here to argue on that. That's fine if they need some more time. I would, though, like to have a quick opportunity to respond at the appropriate time to some of the points that he just made. Very briefly.
There you go.
Sure.
Good job, prosecutor.
If I could, just 5 minutes, Your Honor. Maybe 7 minutes.
All right, come on, because you're sinking.
On page 13, they do identify their theory of motive, which is essentially he's trying to shift focus away from a potential financial investigation to himself.
Okay, this is not a good argument. I'm telling you right now, this is a bad argument, and it's not going to go well with the judge.
So therefore, he murders his wife and son to avoid scrutiny and puts himself in the middle of a murder investigation as the person who finds the victims of murder. And as SLED will say, and they've said over and over, when you investigate murders, you start from a circle and you work your way out. And so their theory is to take himself away from being scrutinized.
They really need to get rid of this woman. She is not looking good for them, especially sitting where she's sitting. She looks completely like enamored with this guy. This is the kind of woman right here that you imagine that she would sleep with this guy in a heartbeat to make sure that she got her point across. That's bad.
In financial misdealings, he puts himself in the middle of a murder investigation. The case law dealing with admissible evidence pertaining to financial crimes in a murder fall into a couple of categories. One is, and really it comes down to 2 points. One, they either kill the victim.
Wait a second. What did he just say? Let's bring this back.
Admissible evidence pertaining to financial crimes in a murder fall into a couple of categories.
A couple of categories.
One is, and really it comes down to 2 points.
2 points.
One, they either kill the victim to avoid the victim disclosing their misconduct. Either the victim is the victim of the financial crime itself, or the victim is a witness or has some other ability.
So basically, he's saying that they need to have information that could basically lead to him being indicted.
To alert law enforcement or authorities of these financial crimes. That's number one. And the Stiegel case, Your Honor, that you cited,
So it's going to be number 2. Are you even going to get to that?
it's a federal.
Spell that word for me so we can.
I'm sorry, Siegel, Siegel. That's at 536 F3rd 306. It's Fourth Circuit opinion. And the defendant in the Siegel case was charged with violating Title 18 United States Code, Section 1512, which requires the government to prove not only the defendant killed the victim, but killed the victim for purposes of preventing him or anyone else from providing law enforcement with information about federal crimes.
That's point 1. Is he ever going to make point 2? We'll see.
And so the federal crimes in the Siegel case were the financial crimes. And so that falls squarely within a logical motive, why it's relevant, and why we meet the acid test. The other grounds is if the murdering of the victim, it causes a financial windfall or benefit to the defense.
The only problem is it did both.
So that the defendant can gain money in order to work himself or herself out of the financial predicament they're in.
So are you're distinguishing that from the state's theory and allegations in this case?
Yes, I'm telling you, Your Honor, the case law they cited, case law that we've looked at and that we submit to the court, those are the 2 cadence of motive evidence in murder cases where you get financial crimes. It's either by killing the victim, they get a financial windfall. By killing the victim, they prevent the victim from reporting their financial crimes.
So which one is it? I think it's both.
And what we don't have here in this case, Your Honor, there's no evidence that Alec Murdaugh would have reaped any financial benefit from murdering Paul and Maggie.
But he's already stolen from people to financially benefit under weird circumstances that his housekeeper just happened to fall down some stairs in his house and die, and he reaped the financial benefits of that particular case. You're arguing something that is not going to work well for you.
There's no evidence of any life insurance. No evidence of any life insurance.
I think the prosecution is going to argue something a little bit different, but we'll see.
Whatsoever. No evidence of anything like that. There's no evidence that Maggie or Paul knew of any alleged financial improprieties involving Alec. They don't put it in here, and frankly, it does not exist in any of the terabytes of information we've received. You know, we've read in the press over years that Maggie had hired a forensic accountant. Didn't happen. No evidence of it. It's not in the case.
That's interesting news.
That Maggie and Alec were having marital problems, and that there was an impending divorce, and that would have disclosed to the financial house of cards. Not true, didn't happen, not in the case. And there's no evidence whatsoever that Maggie and Paul were a risk to Alec to disclose anything relating to any financial misdeeds.
But if Maggie knew about it and he knew that she knew about it because he confided with his wife, just saying.
Then there's this issue of he did it to engender sympathy and to distract, and as Your Honor, and he said.
But you also have to understand that Murdaugh has already tried to distract from this particular information by trying to pay people off.
On June 7th, Randolph Murdaugh, his father, was put back in the hospital to die, who did die 2 days later. I mean, if this was about sympathy, he had all the sympathy coming to him from the firm and the community, losing his father. So there's
One thing has nothing to do with the other, and the judge, I have a feeling, is going to deny this.
really no logical relevance that meets the acid test that this court has to determine. Doesn't meet the acid test that it is that it's logically relevant. There's just no case law to support it. We would certainly further brief that. There are other points that we may not like to address. First is this.
You can see the fear in Murdaugh's face right now because he sees this guy just bumbling.
There's a day of reckoning coming on June 10th because of the motion to compel in the voting action case, as Your Honor knows, experienced civil trial.
You can see right there from his face, Murdaugh does not even believe the bullshit that his own attorney is trying to throw out there.
Judge, well, as criminal trial judge, that motion was to get Mr. Murdaugh's financial information for purposes of punitive damages. And the extent of what would have been ordered in a practical, in most every case, is a financial statement. And in fact, the evidence is that Mr. Murdaugh had handwritten out a financial statement for purposes of that hearing. All he had to do was produce a financial statement, or a statement of net.
You really, God bless, you really need to get rid of this woman right here because she is just glory-eyed. If she had not gone to law school, I can imagine that she would have worked a glory hole. Just saying.
And as Your Honor knows, there's no
She doesn't even believe him.
doomsday reckoning in that regard in a civil case. The other issue that he raises, the state grand jury is issuing subpoenas for public corruption of something in connection with the voting accident case. There's no evidence that Alec Murdaugh knew of those subpoenas.
I will tell you. I will tell you, as someone that has sat down at a poker table and played against some really high stake poker players, that woman gives everything away. And I mean everything away. I can tell that she is, right now is sitting on 2 2s, and I've got a royal flush, and she is going to play it out to the very end, and she's going to go, I don't understand how you beat me at this. Because her poker face is absolutely shite. It is garbage. She has got no chance. They need to remove this woman off of his defense as soon as possible. Get her the hell away from him, because she has got the worst poker face that you could ever imagine. And I'm not even a good poker player. Just saying. Just saying.
No evidence, I don't even know if we've been provided those subpoenas, Your Honor. So, I mean, they're throwing something out there without any connection. And then, Your Honor, and that's, you can't, and part of our bill of particulars was asking for what specific evidence do you intend to introduce? And the answer is everything. Well, so it's not an all or nothing proposition either, Your Honor. He was confronted as the evidence that they intend to present on June 7th by a bookkeeper.
Murdaugh has the worst team that he could possibly fucking have. And I'm sorry, I'm not finding their defense of this very compelling.
People in the law firm about where's this fee money? This was fee money. This wasn't client settlement proceed money. It wasn't lien money that should go to a third-party healthcare provider. This was attorney's fee within the firm. And he was questioned about that. Got a call that his father was going back into the hospital. And so they want to bootstrap that one conversation into introducing evidence of 20 years of financial.
Everything matters whenever you're prosecuting somebody. And I will tell you, this prosecutor is very confident, but don't be too confident, because you do not have all of your docs lined in a row. Just saying.
Fraud, an unconnected chain of events, a hamster on a wheel of financial fraud, because he had one conversation about one transaction. And Your Honor, that is certainly, if the court is going to allow anything relating to that, it should be limited to that, not open the door for 20 years of alleged financial irregularities. And then lastly, Your Honor, the shooting on the side.
She looks like a deer caught in headlights. You're not helping the defense at all. Remove her.
Of the road. This happened after the murder. And, they filed in their motion, they've asked that you go ahead and rule that is admissible in this case at trial. But his explanation of the shooting on the side of the road is he was distraught over being confronted by the law firm over financial misdealings. He resigned from the law firm that day, and the shooting was
horrible excuse
by the law firm of alleged financial irregularities. And it happened after the murder, had nothing to do with the murder, and it certainly should not be admissible. So,
Yes.
Your Honor, that's sort of
Well,
a very
admissible.
foot view of our argument, and we will follow it up with a brief with case law.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break, 5-minute recess.
But he hasn't
Here,
given any
back
sort
to-
of information.
Thank you, Judge.
No information. Nothing. All right, we're going to fast forward a little bit because the defense is absolutely horrid. Do you think they'll remove Chicky Baby from this? They should. This judge is not buying any of this BS. If you're watching this, you need to get girl to get a better poker face.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Very briefly, because I understand that we'll probably return at some point to argue this in more detail, but I do just want to respond to some of the contentions from the defense. And, the first one is, and I have the cases, and we've cited them in there, I'm not going to read them all, but they all very specifically talk about how motive is a specifically, and one of them, maybe the most specifically recognized exceptions to 404B, and how particularly important it is in a case. And
There you go.
It's especially important in this case. But one thing I didn't mention before that I do want to mention, when we talk about the acid test of Lyle, and what that really refers to is that logical connection. And I think I heard Mr. Griffin even say, okay, he's identified the connection. But let's talk about that logical connection. Within 30 seconds of the first deputy who arrived on the scene on the night of June 7th, 2021, Alec Murdaugh said, my son's been involved in this boat case. I know that's what it is. Within 30 seconds of a deputy arriving, starts talking about the boat case. He made it immediately relevant.
Yeah.
And then if you start to walk that logical connection back, how do you explain what that means? What is the boat case without explaining what the boat case is? And then how do you explain how that can matter to him so much if you don't start walking back what all that means to his status and his finances, and more importantly, to uncovering or protecting from.
This is a bad move on the prosecution. I understand you're trying to get the information in about the boat case. I understand you're wanting to get it in, but I'm telling you right now, you're barking up the wrong tree, and more than likely the judge is going to say, well, yeah, we're not going to bring that in.
Being uncovered who he really was. He says in my motion that I just want to show that he's a bad guy. And that's not the case. And the case law is very clear about that, that if it's evidence of motive, the fact that it also shows the existence of another crime does not make it invincible if it is valid evidence of motive. He tries to distinguish the cases that we've cited talking about long-standing financial crimes as being the motive for a murder, and said, well, in those cases, he was trying to kill the victim of those financial crimes before they just outed the defendant. Well, it's the same thing here, Your Honor. It's just this case is different. This case is unique. This case is more complex. He's still trying to prevent who he really is from being outed. But unlike those cases where you had a specific victim who had been victimized, who was going to testify in court, and you could just kill them, he can't kill everybody. He can't kill 11 years worth of victims. He can't do that. But what he does do is kill his wife and son, who were liabilities in the boat case. And immediately it stops everything. Immediately it stops that day of reckoning. Immediately he no longer has to answer that question about those fees. That if it failed to be answered, was going to lead the firm to do exactly what they end up doing 3 months later and uncovering it all. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It prevents detection. And the reason why, if you look at the first page of my motion.
All right, you really need to bring your case better. You've basically got the judge to agree. The judge is already agreeing with you on about 59% of it. But you're not making a good case. I'm just saying the prosecution, you need to just say, Judge, the evidence is there that he caused this. So let's wrap this up. Let's bring all of the dirty laundry forward. Let's talk about the whole entire case. And then we can let the jury decide.
The reason why, who he projected to the world and who he really was is not there just to show that he's a bad guy. It's there to show how different those things were and how important they were to him to stop this person from ever being exposed. That's what's important to show, the difference between those two. And how important that was to him, a man who never faced accountability in his life. He had to protect his reputation. Your Honor,
I agree.
Another thing that Mr. Griffin referred to is some of the language that talks about crimes not being that are equally heinous. And again, I said this point earlier, and I want to come back to that, is that we're talking about a number of financial crimes and a murder.
Well, bring it home, prosecutor.
Okay? This is not propensity evidence that because of the financial crimes and the murder. There's a logical connection, though, that we've talked about of 11 years of that slow burn finally coming to a head. And that's precisely what these cases talk about when they talk about motive being relevant to show why someone might do something that is foreign to any rational person.
Come on.
And this case has that more than any other I think I've ever seen.
No, not true. That was
Anything further?
horrible prosecution.
Well, the state's response, I see, was filed 11:50.
So the judge is basically letting both sides pontificate about their case and try to bring a case. The judge already has made up his mind, and he probably made up his mind about 3 minutes into this information because he's going, okay, there's certain things that I can actually let in because it is proper. It was presented proper in whatever motion that he received, and he's going to look at it and he's going to go, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and allow this portion of it in until somebody can make a compelling reason why it should not be put in, which the defense has not. The prosecution basically has cakewalk on this stuff. The judge has already made up his mind. He's already decided what he is going to do. Well, let's just see what the judge has to say.
2 p.m. on December 7th, or since it was at that time. It filed yesterday at 9:10. So very, very little time for the court or for the defense to review the filing of the state. Certainly the citation stated United States versus Siegel, which I understand was authored by Judge Traxler.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Former South Carolina state solicitor and well-respected jurist. We certainly want to review his case among others cited and anything cited by the defense in the response. As I indicated, this is a reverse motion in limine, basically for the court to make a preliminary ruling on the admissibility of how many years of
About a decade.
a decade of acts. So that's the court proceeds cautiously in all instances regarding motions in limine because of listening to the arguments. But arguments are not evidence, and lawyers don't testify.
Right.
So all of this will be reviewed and scrutinized by the court, and appropriate rulings will be made at the appropriate time, but certainly the defense is entitled to have an opportunity to respond.
Oh,
We'll point out, however, that any ruling on any issue can't be based solely on other cases. Each case is unique.
oh,
And rulings must be fashioned according to the particulars of a certain case, of given cases, not just, we don't expect whatever occurred in Siegel, the case of 2008 to be exactly the same facts. Each case had facts in each case generally would be unique. So we'll look to receive the response by the state, and we'll address those issues later. Anything else?
Oh.
Your Honor, when would you like us to respond?
When would you like to respond?
If that's not an option, we are coming up on your
Yeah.
yeah, they know they've already lost this. She has got the worst fucking poker face. God damn. Woman, you've got the worst poker face. You have no faith in this guy. You have no faith in this guy.
How's that sound to you?
That sounds fine, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, we could email it to you and the state with the idea that we can mail it to the corporate court. It's difficult to get stuff filed down here unless you walk it into the court or mail it.
Goddamn, what's up with all the trucks in the background?
Supreme Court has deemed it not to electronic filing for criminal cases. If we could get it to you and the Attorney General on that day, but put it in the mail to the clerk's office. I would appreciate it.
No objection from the state.
That is a look of defeat. That is a look of defeat. That is a look
Fine,
of like, what
concerning
the fuck do I
the
do?
proposed order on the motion.
She
to
has
compel.
no faith in her leaders.
Sure.
Proposed order on the granting of the motion to compel.
So we need to share that with the Attorney General before we send it to you, Your Honor, is that correct?
And send it to me and to the Attorney General simultaneously, and I will await any comment by the Attorney General.
We can have it next Wednesday, Your Honor.
All right.
So they're wanting to file some motions by a particular time. That's all this is about.
Or sooner.
This girl has the worst poker face. The worst poker face.
And Your Honor, when would they respond to our filing? I mean, they've made this motion, we're responding, and then obviously we don't want to reply. And then maybe we might want to show the bubble.
Come on, give us a hearing date.
It's been a lot of practice, civil laws, with building that you do in search server.
Your Honor, we certainly would request, a week as well, so if I close the business or by, on the 23rd, or by.
So right now they're looking at what date they want to have their motions filed by.
They were advising me the office may be closed, but that's not stop us from working.
So he's very confident right now because he knows that he already won this.
One additional issue. And been pointed out that Mr. Murdaugh's grandfather's portrait hangs in the courtroom. Discussed the issue with the clerk as to whether it should be removed.
It should be removed.
We have no objection.
Leave it to the court's discretion now.
And,
It'll be
those
removed.
clerks are typically in charge of the courthouse grounds, and indicated that she preferred a court order to that effect. There's no objection, so that will be done. There's precedent for it in the state of Virginia where the judge ordered removal of portraits for certain trials. So it's not without precedent.
Your Honor, we consent.
Yes. All right,
Yeah,
very good.
gone.
So ordered. Anything further today?
Nothing today.
Nothing from the defendant, Your Honor.
Very well, court will be adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So there you have it. There you have it. That has been argued, and it looks like they're going to file some briefs probably later on. They're giving them a week. So if today is the 10th, you're looking at about the 17th. They will probably have their information in by right before the weekend. And I can almost see that a lot of their motions are probably going to be denied. They did not put forth a compelling case on anything that they had to say. This poor woman, they need to really remove her and move her to another position, move him over there, because I'm telling you right now, it does not look good for him, because she has the worst poker face that you could actually ever imagine from somebody. She looks completely scared, like a deer caught in headlights. My opinion, it's not going to look good in the long run, but I can guarantee that they're going to be bringing her in just basically to probably question a lot of the females. I don't know how many females. I don't know who they're going to bring in, but a pretty face does not necessarily mean that you're going to get your information out there very well. Sometimes that pretty face can be a sure giveaway that something is awry. Just saying. Prosecutor needs to really up their game on this information, because they really are very long-winded on what they have to say. If you want to make a good case, you present your case, you present the facts, present the law. People are going to follow that much quicker. You become long-winded, you're going to lose your jury. And I mean, on both of these guys, because they are very long-winded on everything that they have to say. And I don't know, it's because they might be a little bit nervous about the TV cameras, but man, get your shit together, because it is not looking good for either one of these sides. But at that, I am going to call it a night. I have reviewed all that I feel like reviewing tonight. I'm sure that there's not much more information that is happening with the Taibbi stuff, with the Twitter information 3.0. Thank you for telling us all the information that everybody pretty much already knew, and you're just basically confirming it for the rest of the world, but they really don't care in the first place. So why don't you give good information that actually tells the rest of the world? Because I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this absolute garbage, and it doesn't give me any more information. Because all you have to say is the firm's executives on day one of the January 6th crisis at least tried to pay lip service to its dizzying array of rules. By day 2, they began wavering. By day 3, 1 million rules were reduced to 1. What we say goes. Give us more information, because we already understand what your position is. We understand what Twitter was doing. Everybody that knows already. Give us something better. You're giving proof and basically backing up what everybody already was screaming about, but weren't allowed to talk about on any sort of form or format. You were told that you were basically, oh, you're making up shit. Everybody already knew this. Other people may not have. I don't know if they're even going to be paying attention to what you have to say about this. But this ends a wonderful Friday night. I wasn't able to talk about the information that I wanted to bring up to you. I'll see if I can find it, because this is what I actually wanted to talk about on my Friday. This is what I actually wanted to do on my Friday. This is what I wanted to bring up. Just absolutely something crazy. So this is what I'm going to end my wonderful evening with on a Friday evening. I wanted to talk about the best information that you could ever see. And that was the Florida Man. Because the Florida Man is what I wanted to dedicate my Fridays to. Because Florida Man Fridays would be awesome. Think about this. 60 times Florida Man did something so crazy we had to read the headings twice. Florida is undoubtedly the most curious, wackiest, and unusual state in the United States, inhabited by the weirdest people ever, and no matter as the local Floridians have to deal with alligators, venomous snakes, seasonless climate, mosquitoes, and such high humidity that leaves you all wet in a second. On one hot day every day. Also, bona fide Florida state inhabitants have an old tradition of living for today, no matter the dire consequences. We are not only talking about those people that chose to live in the Everglades as Miami Floridians, and also quite kooky. And if the dire consequences do happen, it is law to make every arrest public information, thus putting every deed of these crazy people on the spotlight. There are tons of unbelievable headlines out there about situations that have belittled everyone. And while there are many different individuals involved in these stories, Florida Man always takes the cake with some of the most mind-boggling examples, thanks to Twitter account named Florida Man that gathers real-life stories of the world's worst superheroes. We can share these funny stories of people with you, and it's truly amazing. Take a look at some of the best headlines about the shenanigans of the Florida Man. Lucky shirt. Florida Man wears F the police shirt to court, wins case. Killer squirrel. Florida Man attacked during selfie with squirrel. Not that interesting. Telltale signs. Who need drugs? No, seriously. I have drugs. Florida Man in No, seriously, I have drugs t-shirt arrested for possession of drugs. Go figure. Number 4, best used for a private plane. As you can see, Florida Man suspected of using private plane to draw a giant radar penis. That's funny. Flying alligators. A Florida man charged with assault with deadly weapon after throwing alligator through a Wendy's drive-through window. Yes, that did happen. Modern Robin Hood. Florida man steals car, realizes a baby is in it, drops baby off safely, and makes his getaway. Florida man, don't play. Florida cop claims Burger King put dirt on his food. Investigation reveals it was seasoning. I bet this guy is really good at solving crimes. Thousands of gun owners in Florida plan to shoot down Hurricane Irma. Hospital wait. Florida man gets tired of waiting at hospital, steals ambulance, and drives home. Cleverest camo. Florida man tries to rob GameStop while wielding transparent bag on his head. Well, you want to see where you're going. Hanging out. Florida man breaks into jail just to hang with his bros. Leave crabs alone. Hillary is a lying bitch. Oh, it's Hillary's a lying bitch. I'm sorry. Interesting. Florida man apparently painted an anti-Hillary message on Tampa Bay crabs. But the question is, were those crabs still on his body? Florida man hides in swamp after high-speed police chase, gets stuck, and licked by police dog. I guess my question would be, was Florida man wearing peanut butter? And where was he wearing that peanut butter at? Number 14, mode of transportation. Florida man who tried to run to Bermuda in inflatable bubble rescued by Coast Guard again. Florida man's not too smart sometimes. Florida man denies drinking and driving, says he only swigged bourbon at stop signs. So I wasn't drinking and driving. I was actually at stop signs and drinking. Florida man leaves job at Burger King, steals all their nuggets because fuck it. You might want to cook those. Just saying. It says about a lot about local cuisine. Florida man arrested for assaulting girlfriend with fried chicken. I don't know if she liked the KFC down in Florida. Hey. Birds and bees. Florida man climbs on playground equipment to tell children where babies come from. This man is the one that's telling you where babies come from. I don't know, man. Face tattoos just really don't work. Just saying. Number 19, angriest birds. Watch. Florida man steals neighbor's peacock, gets chased by angry birds. That's pretty funny. Number 20. Should have stayed at school then. Florida man messages to misspell school on warning sign twice. Skull, skull. No arms, no problem. This Florida man, he stabbed tourists despite not having any arms. Okay. The monkey told him to do it. There's his little ape friend. Florida man arrested for driving stolen vehicle while monkey clings to his chest. That's not very interesting. finding love in the most unexpected places. Florida man ripped urinal from restaurant bathroom wall, ran away naked into the woods. Well, you want to do your business in private. Why not take a urinal from the bathroom? Just saying. Florida man pauses police to rehydrate with stolen Capri Sun, says smoking crack makes him thirsty. I imagine so. Trick me once. Florida man gives police exonerating dashcam video following traffic accident. Accidentally includes video of him robbing a beauty store. Not the brightest one. Number 26. And the goat would still like to be alive. Florida man. He admits to killing goat and drinking its blood for pagan sacrifice. Would still like to be senator. Yes, this libertarian Senate candidate really did sacrifice a goat and drink its blood. Everything you need to know about Augustus Sol Invictus. With the side of traffic jam. Florida man arrested for eating pancakes in the middle of a crosswalk. I could go on all day about the Florida man. But alas, my time has ended. As you will see the end, I will show it to you. The most beautiful ending with a duck's ass up in the air. Enjoy and have a wonderful weekend. It is Friday here in Atlanta, Georgia, and nothing could be more fun than watching stupid people do stupid.
Exotica.